Hey there, tonight we're uncovering the vibrant world of New Year in ancient China, where rituals didn't just ring in luck. They kindled the fire of an empire's identity. What you're about to discover might surprise you. It wasn't just fireworks that lit the skies. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now get comfortable, perhaps dim the lights or find that perfect pillow position, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. In the swirling mists of ancient China, where emperors reigned with the drama of soap opera stars and myths were as common as dumplings at a family feast, we find ourselves at the origins of the Chinese New Year. Now, this wasn't just any holiday. It was the Super Bowl, the Oscars, and a pyrotechnic festival rolled into one. But where did it all begin? Buckle up, because we're diving into the legendary roots of this grand celebration, starting with the Xia and Shang dynasties. These were the dynasties that thought, hey, why not celebrate the end of winter with a bang? And by bang, I mean both literally and metaphorically. The Xia dynasty, kicking off around 2070 BCE, is often credited with setting the stage for what would become this epic annual bash. It was a time when people were still figuring out the whole civilization thing. You know, building cities, creating hierarchies, inventing bureaucracy, all the fun stuff. Fast forward to the Shang dynasty, around 1600 BCE, and things start to get pretty interesting. The Shang folks, not to be outdone, added a few twists of their own to the New Year festivities, ensuring the event would be remembered for millennia. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Enter Nian, the terror of every well-laid New Year's plan. According to legend, this beast wasn't just your average grumpy neighbor. Nian was a lion-like creature with a taste for chaos and an appetite for, well, people. Every year, as the winter chill began to thaw, Nian would descend upon villages, looking to crash the party. Not exactly your ideal guest, right? But here's where the story gets good. The villagers, not keen on being Nian's dinner, decided to fight back with the kind of ingenuity that would make Mac Jiva proud. Through trial and error, they discovered that Nian had a few weaknesses. Red decorations, check. Loud noises, check. All things that Nian purportedly despised. So the villagers decked out their homes in red and started making a racket with drums, firecrackers, and anything else that would scare the bejesus out of the monster. And lo and behold, it worked. Nian was sent packing, presumably to crash someone else's party next year. Now, before you scoff at the absurdity of it all, let's take a moment to appreciate the genius here. This was a time when people didn't have access to Google. They couldn't just look up how to scare away a monster. They had to get creative, and this creativity laid the groundwork for rituals that would endure centuries. The use of red and loud noises became staples of the Chinese New Year, not just because they worked on a mythical beast, but because they also symbolized good fortune and prosperity. Red, after all, is the color of luck in Chinese culture, and who wouldn't want a little extra luck at the start of a new year? Speaking of fireworks, we need to talk about the economics of ancient pyrotechnics. Picture this. It's 1000 BCE, and you're tasked with assembling the ancient equivalent of 4th of July fireworks. Back then, gunpowder was still centuries away, but the concept of loud, explosive celebrations was already taking root. The early firecrackers were made using bamboo stalks, which, when thrown into a fire, would explode with a loud bang due to the air pockets inside. This was the boom before the boom, if you will. And while we're on the subject of costs, let's crunch some numbers. A single stalk of bamboo could cost about 10 wen, ancient Chinese currency, which was a pretty penny given that the average daily wage for a laborer was around 30 to 50 wen. So, imagine spending a third of your daily income just to hear a loud pop. But what's a little financial strain when you're keeping a mythical beast at bay, right? This combination of myth-making and economic reality underscores the dual nature of the Chinese New Year's origins. It wasn't just about scaring off a monster. It was also a clever way to unify communities, boost morale, and let's be honest, throw a party that everyone could enjoy. The new year became a time to clean out the old, usher in the new, and hope for a prosperous year ahead. It was a collective sigh of relief that another year had passed, and a new one held promise. And hey, if it took a terrifying beast to kickstart all this, Maybe Nyan wasn't such a bad guy after all. As we peel back the layers of these early New Year celebrations, it's clear that what started as a means of survival transformed into a cultural cornerstone. Rituals born from necessity and myth have become traditions that continue to shape not just an empire, but a global celebration observed by over 1 billion people today. And that, my friends, is how you turn a party crasher into a cultural icon. But wait, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's fast forward to the Han Dynasty, where things start to get a little more imperial. Picture it. We've left behind the Shang's bamboo pyrotechnics and mythical monsters, stepping into a world where politics and pageantry are the name of the game. The Han Dynasty, kicking off in 206 BCE, was like the original Game of Thrones. Thrones were hotly contested, and dragons, well, those were just in the stories. But the real drama was in how the emperors used the new year to flex their muscles and reinforce their rule. The Han emperors were clever, politicians with a flair for the dramatic. They figured out that the new year wasn't just a party. It was a golden opportunity to remind everyone who was boss. The emperor's role in the New Year festivities was like the ultimate PR campaign, complete with grand parades, public feasts, and ceremonies that made the askers look like a backyard barbecue. It was all about showing power, but with a touch of benevolence. You see, nothing says, "I'm in charge," like giving out food and money while everyone's watching. And then there were the gifts. The emperor would distribute silk, coins, and sometimes even land to loyal subjects. It was like opera's giveaway show, but with a lot more silk and a lot less screaming. The message was clear. Loyalty to the emperor pays dividends, quite literally. The whole affair was orchestrated with the kind of precision that would make a modern event planner weep with envy. And remember, this was all before Google Calendar, folks. Now, coordinating a nationwide celebration without the internet sounds like a logistical nightmare, doesn't it? Enter the lunar calendar, the unsung hero of ancient timekeeping. The Han Dynasty officially adopted the lunisolar calendar, which was a mix of lunar and solar cycles. This calendar was no small feat. It required constant observation of the moon, meticulous calculations, and more than a little guesswork. Imagine trying to plan your life around a calendar that shifts with the whims of the cosmos. Forget daylight saving time. This was cosmic saving time. But the lunar calendar wasn't just about keeping track of months. It was a way to sync everyone up to the emperor's beat. By aligning the new year with the lunar calendar, the Han rulers essentially set the rhythm of life. It was as much about unity as it was about control. When the emperor said, "Happy New Year," everyone from the bustling streets of Chang'an to the farmlands of the Yangtze knew it was time to celebrate, and more importantly, to pay their respects to the throne. Let's talk numbers, because this wasn't just a philosophical exercise. The Han Dynasty's population was around 60 million people, stretched over an empire that spanned nearly 6 million square kilometers. Imagine trying to coordinate a New Year celebration across that expanse without the luxury of text messages or social media. It's enough to make you appreciate your group chat, isn't it? As the New Year approached, entire bureaucracies swung into motion. Officials were dispatched to every corner of the empire, bearing the emperor's decrees and making sure that everyone, from the rice farmers to the silk merchants, was ready to celebrate in style. It was a top-down operation, the kind of efficiency that would give modern corporations a run for their money. And as the fireworks, or rather, fire bamboo, lit up the skies, the emperor's influence was reinforced with every bang and flash. But beneath the glittering surface, there were tensions brewing. The Han Dynasty was a time of great innovation, but also great inequality. While the emperor and his court feasted on delicacies, many of the empire's subjects struggled to put food on the table. The New Year, with all its pomp and circumstance, was a reminder of the vast chasm between the rulers and the ruled. It was a celebration, yes, but also a stark illustration of power dynamics. Yet the allure of the New Year was undeniable. Even if you were just a humble farmer, the promise of a fresh start, the hope for a better year, and the joy of a shared celebration made it all worthwhile. The myths and legends, the rituals and traditions, they all served to weave a rich tapestry that bound the empire together, year after year. That's the beauty of it, the way a single celebration could encompass both the grand ambitions of emperors and the simple hopes of everyday people. And so, the New Year in the Han Dynasty was more than just a date on the calendar. It was a master class in political theater, a celebration that reinforced the social order while offering a glimpse of possibility. The emperors understood the power of tradition and spectacle, using them as tools to maintain their rule and inspire loyalty. It was a delicate balance, one that required constant attention and a keen understanding of human nature. The Han rulers might not have had spreadsheets or smartphones, but they knew how to throw a party that everyone would remember. And as the centuries rolled on, these traditions evolved, solidifying the new year as an indelible part of Chinese culture. Emperors came and went, but the celebration endured, a testament to the enduring power of ritual and the human desire for renewal. So, as we leave the Han dynasty behind and prepare to journey into the next chapter of this story, let's pause to appreciate the legacy they left behind. The myths, the politics, the practicalities, all of it blended into a celebration that still resonates today. The new year was more than just a date. It was an empire's heartbeat, a reminder of the past, and a promise of the future. And as we'll see, its story is far from over. As we bid adieu to the Han dynasty's imperial fanfare and political pyrotechnics, it's time to step into the Tang dynasty's grand theater, where the Chinese New Year wasn't just a celebration. It was the ultimate cultural blockbuster. If the Han dynasty was the original Game of Thrones, the Tang dynasty was its Renaissance festival, bursting with art, poetry, and of course, a generous dose of extravagant spending. Let's set the scene. It's the early 7th century, and the Tang dynasty is kicking off not with a whimper, but with a cultural explosion that would make even the most seasoned Hollywood producer blush. This was a time when Chang'an, the Tang capital, was the epicenter of sophistication, a city so vibrant it might as well have been the Instagram of its day. You see, the Tang emperors understood that nothing quite says, "We're the best," like a celebration that's both a feast for the senses and a drain on the treasury. The New Year festivities were an exercise in opulence. The imperial court hosted banquets that could rival any Michelin-starred affair, replete with delicacies like roast duck and lotus root soup. But it wasn't just about the food. Oh no, the Tang emperors were patrons of the arts, and their New Year parties were the Coachella of ancient China, featuring poets, musicians, and dancers who turned the palace into a kaleidoscope of creativity. Now, before you imagine that everyone was just basking in this cultural glow, let's peel back the silk curtains. The Tang dynasty was a time of great social divide. While the elite were busy writing poetry and commissioning paintings, the common folk were often left counting their copper coins, trying to keep up with the dizzying pace of the festivities. It's like being invited to the Met Gala with a flea market budget, glamorous from afar, but a logistical nightmare up close. Speaking of budgets, let's talk numbers. A single New Year's celebration during the Tang era could cost what would be millions in today's dollars. Yes, that's right. These parties were the kind of spendthrift spectacle that would make modern accountants break into a cold sweat. The Tang economy, buoyed by trade along the Silk Road, could afford such lavishness, but it came at a price. The grandeur masked a growing disparity between the rich and the poor, a reality that was as brutal as it was beautifully choreographed. And then there was the poetry. Ah, Tang poetry, the crème de la crème of Chinese literature. New Year poems became the hallmark of the era, with poets like Lai Bai and Du Fu weaving words that captured the spirit of the times. Their verses, rich with imagery and emotion, were recited at gatherings, becoming the social media posts of the day. But when you dig deeper, these poems often hinted at the underlying tensions of the era, the fleeting nature of wealth, the transience of power, and the ever-looming shadow of inequality. Now, let's bust a myth or two, shall we? The Tang dynasty is often romanticized as a golden age of peace and prosperity, but it wasn't all peaches and cream. For every opulent feast in the capital, there were countless villages struggling with poverty and banditry. The empire's borders were under constant threat from nomadic tribes, and internal strife was never far from the surface. The New Year celebrations, with their emphasis on harmony and renewal, were as much a distraction as they were a celebration, a carefully constructed narrative to maintain the illusion of unity. But here's the thing. Even with all its contradictions, the Tang dynasty's New Year was a cultural phenomenon that left an indelible mark. The emphasis on art and poetry during the celebrations became a template for future generations, embedding a love for creativity into the very fabric of Chinese society. It's an irony almost too delicious to ignore. A dynasty that struggled with inequality and external threats managed to create a cultural legacy that celebrated the human spirit in its most vibrant form. As we zoom out from the Tang dynasty's theatrical revelry, it's clear that these New Year celebrations were more than just parties. They were a reflection of an empire at its zenith, teetering on the brink of both brilliance and collapse. The Tang emperors knew the power of spectacle, using it to craft a narrative of power, culture, and unity, even if the reality was a bit more complex. And so, the New Year became a canvas, painted with both the splendor of imperial ambition and the stark hues of economic disparity. So, what lessons can we draw from the Tang dynasty's New Year extravaganza? Perhaps it's the enduring power of art to transcend the mundane, to elevate even the most politically charged celebrations into something that resonates through the ages. Or maybe it's a reminder that behind every grand display, there's a story of human struggle, ambition, and the eternal quest for meaning. As we prepare to leave the Tang era and venture into the next chapter of this saga, let's savor the contradictions and complexities that made it such a pivotal moment in history. The New Year was more than just a celebration. It was a stage where the grand opera of the Tang dynasty played out, full of drama, artistry, and yes, a fair share of chaos. And as we'll see, the story of Chinese New Year is far from over. There are more layers to peel back, more myths to debunk, and more history to uncover. Stay tuned, because the best is yet to come. As the curtain falls on the Tang dynasty's glittering spectacle, we find ourselves stepping into the Song dynasty, where the Chinese New Year takes on a decidedly more democratic flair. Now, before you picture a medieval version of Woodstock with peasants in bell-bottom tunics, let's set the record straight. The Song dynasty, which kicked off in 960 CE, wasn't exactly a utopia of equality. But hey, when it came to New Year celebrations, the common folk finally got a taste of the action, thanks to some serious economic hustle. The Song period was a time of unprecedented economic growth, courtesy of a burgeoning market economy that would make even the most ambitious Silicon Valley entrepreneur nod in approval. We're talking about a GDP that was through the roof, fueled by innovations like paper money and a booming trade network. It's as if someone handed the empire a cheat code for prosperity, and they ran with it. With money flowing like dumplings at a family reunion, New Year festivities started to trickle down to the masses. For the first time, everyday citizens weren't just spectators in the emperor's grand party. They were active participants. The streets of cities like Kaifeng and Hangzhou transformed into vibrant marketplaces, buzzing with energy as vendors hawked everything from food to fireworks. Imagine Times Square meets your local farmer's market, but with a side of Confucian philosophy. It was a party with a purpose, to bring people together, boost morale, and stimulate the economy. But let's not get too sentimental. The Song dynasty's New Year wasn't all mooncakes and melodious harmony. Class struggles still reared their ugly heads, reminding everyone that even in celebration, inequality was the uninvited guest who just wouldn't leave. While the urban elite enjoyed luxurious banquets with dishes that could outshine a Michelin-starred menu, the rural poor were often left to scrape together whatever they could find. It was a classic case of feast or famine, and for many, the New Year was a bittersweet reminder of the stark socio-economic divide. Speaking of reminders, let's talk about the rise of commercialism in the Song dynasty, because what's a celebration without a little spending spree, right? Enter the printed New Year pictures, the ancient equivalent of Hallmark cards. These woodblock prints featured everything from auspicious symbols to charming depictions of folk tales, and they were all the rage. Imagine a world where your New Year's greeting wasn't a hastily typed text, but a beautifully crafted piece of art. It was Instagram before Instagram, only with less scrolling and more hanging on walls. The introduction of these prints was more than just a clever marketing ploy. It was a reflection of the Song dynasty's vibrant consumer culture. As literacy rates climbed and urban centers flourished, people wanted more than just necessities. They craved art, entertainment, and a touch of luxury. This commercial boom was like a shot of espresso for the economy, energizing trade and fueling a demand for goods that would have made even the most seasoned merchants rub their hands in glee. But beneath the allure of these printed treasures lay a gritty reality. The production of New Year pictures was no artisanal endeavor. It was an industry, employing thousands of workers who toiled in workshops to meet the insatiable demand. These laborers, often paid a pittance, churned out prints with the efficiency of a modern assembly line. Their work a testament to the relentless drive of capitalism, even in its infancy. It was art with a price tag, a reminder that even creativity wasn't immune to the pressures of the market. Yet for all its commercial trappings, the democratization of New Year celebrations in the Song dynasty was a cultural watershed. It marked a shift from imperial exclusivity to communal participation, a recognition that the New Year was as much about the people as it was about the pomp. The celebrations became a melting pot of tradition and innovation, blending the old with the new in a way that resonated across the empire. Of course, this newfound accessibility didn't mean the Song dynasty was free of its own brand of myth-making. The romanticized vision of a harmonious society, united in celebration, often glossed over the tensions simmering beneath the surface. The empire was a patchwork of diverse cultures and interests, each vying for recognition and influence. The New Year, with its promises of renewal and prosperity, was a convenient narrative that papered over these fractures, offering a momentary illusion of unity. But let's not be too cynical. The Song dynasty's New Year was a testament to the resilience of human spirit, a celebration that thrived despite the odds. It was a time when the empire paused to reflect, to hope, and to dream of a better future, a sentiment that transcends time and borders. The printed pictures, the bustling markets, the shared festivities, all of it spoke to a fundamental truth, that no matter the challenges, there is power in community, in coming together to usher in a new year. So, as we wrap up this chapter on the Song dynasty, let's savor the complexities and contradictions that made it such a fascinating era. The democratization of New Year celebrations was more than just a historical footnote. It was a pivotal moment that redefined what it meant to celebrate, to belong, and to hope. And as we prepare to delve into the next chapter of this saga, let's keep in mind that history, much like the New Year, is a tapestry woven from the threads of both myth and reality. Stay tuned, because there's more to uncover, more myths to bust, and more history to explore. The story of the Chinese New Year is far from over, and the best is yet to come. As we unravel the tapestry of the Song dynasty's democratized New Year celebrations, it's time to step into the Ming dynasty, where the festival became a high-stakes game of cultural chess. The Ming era, which began in 1368, was a time when the Chinese New Year took on an even grander role, not just as a celebration, but as a symbol of Chinese identity itself. Emperors used the New Year not just to party, but to weave a narrative of unity that was as intricate as the silk brocades they donned. Now, the Ming dynasty was a bit of a control freak. Imagine a helicopter parent, but with an empire at stake. The rulers knew that to maintain their grip on power, they needed to harness the cultural and psychological power of the New Year. It wasn't just about red lanterns and firecrackers anymore. It was about constructing a national identity that could withstand foreign threats and internal rebellions. Enter the imperial New Year's Eve feast, a tradition so meticulously planned it would make a Swiss watchmaker blush. Emperors hosted extravagant banquets featuring not just delicacies, but entire performances of Chinese opera, turning the palace into a stage for political theater. And while we're on the topic of spending, let's crunch some numbers. The cost of these festivities was astronomical. We're talking thousands of taels of silver, the currency of choice back then. To put that into perspective, a single tael could buy you a year's worth of rice. So when an emperor splashed out thousands, it was a statement, a glittering reminder of imperial power and largesse. This was more than just a party, it was a message. We're rich, we're stable, and by the way, don't even think about rebelling. But, as with all things in history, there was a catch. The Ming dynasty was no stranger to unrest. While the emperor and his court feasted on birds' nest soup and danced to the rhythm of ancient flutes, the people outside those palace walls were often struggling to make ends meet. The contrast was stark, a glittering facade masking a turbulent reality. The New Year celebrations, with their promises of prosperity and unity, were a convenient narrative, papering over the cracks of discontent and inequality. Now, let's take a detour to the realm of myth-busting. The Ming dynasty is often romanticized as a golden era of stability and cultural renaissance. But let's not kid ourselves. Behind the curtain of fireworks and festivities lay a simmering pot of political intrigue and social unrest. The Ming emperors were masters of distraction, using the new year as a tool to unify the masses under a banner of cultural pride, even as the empire faced threats from Mongol invaders and internal power struggles. As we step into the Qing dynasty, which took the reins in 1644, the Chinese New Year became an even more potent symbol of resilience and identity, especially in the face of foreign influence. The Manchu rulers of the Qing were outsiders, and they knew that to govern effectively, they needed to embrace and reinforce Chinese cultural traditions. The New Year celebrations became a vehicle for demonstrating their respect for Han Chinese customs, blending their own Manchu rituals into the mix, a calculated nod to cultural diplomacy. One fascinating development was the introduction of the dragon dance, which became a staple of New Year festivities during the Qing. This wasn't just about entertainment. It was a symbol of strength and good fortune, a vibrant display of collective spirit. The dragon, a mythical creature revered in Chinese culture, became a metaphor for the unity and power of the empire. But let's not ignore the irony here. A foreign dynasty using traditional symbols to legitimize their rule over a culturally distinct population. It was a delicate dance, both literally and figuratively, a testament to the complex interplay of tradition and politics. Economically, the Qing dynasty was a period of great contrast. While trade flourished under the Kangxi and Qianlong emperors, bringing wealth and prosperity, the later years were marked by corruption and economic decline. The New Year, with its emphasis on renewal and prosperity, became a poignant reminder of the empire's heyday, even as the cracks began to show. The celebrations continued to reinforce a sense of continuity and identity, comforting constant in an increasingly uncertain world. Now, as we march toward the conclusion of our historical journey, it's crucial to reflect on how these dynastic New Year celebrations have shaped modern festivities. The threads of tradition, red decorations, firecrackers, feasts, have woven their way through time, creating a tapestry that billions of people celebrate today. But beneath the surface of these joyful gatherings lies a complex legacy of cultural evolution, political maneuvering, and economic realities. So, what's the takeaway from this whirlwind tour of New Year history? Perhaps it's the enduring power of tradition as a unifying force, even amidst the chaos of human ambition and societal change. The New Year has been a stage for emperors and commoners alike, a celebration that transcends class and time. It's a reminder that in the great dance of history, the steps may change, but the rhythm remains constant. And as we wrap up, let's not forget the little things that make the New Year special. The clatter of mahjong tiles, the aroma of dumplings steaming, the crackle of firecrackers in the night. These are the echoes of a history rich with stories, myths, and realities, a celebration that continues to evolve while staying rooted in its past. So, here's to the Chinese New Year, an enduring symbol of renewal, unity, and hope, and maybe a reminder that, in the end, we're all just looking for a reason to come together, celebrate, and perhaps indulge in one too many dumplings. The Vikings and Yule. It's a tale as old as time, if time were measured by horned helmets and pillaging. But first, let's get one thing straight. Those helmets. No horns. Sorry to burst your medieval bubble. Now, onto the main event, Yule. You might think it's all about merry feasting and drinking mead with Odin, but that's just the Hollywood version. The truth, Yule was more about surviving the long, dark winters than starring in a Norse version of Die Hard. The word Yule itself traces back to the Old Norse Jarl, a term that probably made sense back when the sun setting at 3 p.m. was a normal Tuesday. The Vikings celebrated Yule during the winter solstice, the shortest day and the longest night of the year. Talk about a party that could use some daylight. This was a time when the sun basically said, "See you later," and left everyone to freeze in the Scandinavian cold. But the Vikings were nothing if not resourceful. When life gives you endless night, you light a bonfire and call it a holiday. In terms of significance, Yule was like the Super Bowl of Norse festivals, minus the commercials and excessive guacamole. It was believed to be the time when Odin, the big cheese of the Viking pantheon, rode his 8-legged horse, Sleipnir, across the sky. Some say this inspired the idea of Santa's sleigh, but let's not get carried away. Unlike Santa, Odin wasn't interested in milk and cookies. He was more into wisdom and war, as you do. The Vikings would gather around fires, not just for warmth, but in the hopes of summoning the sun back from its vacation. It was less about roasting chestnuts and more about not becoming one. The whole affair was steeped in Norse mythology, with tales of gods and giants, and possibly a few too many ales shared around the fire. But this wasn't just a binge-drinking session with Thor as your drinking buddy. It was a time to honor the gods and ensure the rebirth of the world. If the sun didn't come back, it wasn't just a bad day at the beach. It meant the end of crops, life, and everything in between. Speaking of survival, let's talk about sacrifices. Now, before you picture some gruesome Game of Thrones scene, remember that sacrifices were a practical part of Norse life. They would sacrifice animals, like pigs or horses, in hopes that the gods would be appeased and bless them with a good harvest, or at least not smite them with a particularly harsh blizzard. It was a bit of a gamble, but when the chips are down and the temperature is even lower, you do what you gotta do. Yule was also about community. The harsh winters meant that isolation could be deadly, so gathering for the festival was as much about survival as it was about celebration. It was a time to strengthen bonds and remind yourself that you're not alone in the vast, dark world. The Vikings knew that the only way through the endless night was together, with a side of roasted boar and some ale to wash it down. And let's not forget the Yule log. No, not the dessert. The Vikings would burn a massive log to keep the fire going throughout the Yule season. This was a time before central heating, so a roaring fire was more necessity than novelty. The longer the log burned, the better the prospects were for the coming year. It was like nature's version of a New Year's resolution, without the guilt of not going to the gym. In conclusion, Yule was a complex blend of mythology, practicality, and survival instincts. It was less about decking the halls and more about not freezing your toes off. The Vikings embraced the darkness, knowing that eventually the light would return. And when it did, they were ready to meet it with open arms, full bellies, and a story or two about how they made it through another winter. So next time you sip on your mulled wine or complain about the early sunset, remember the Vikings and their Yule, where the stakes were higher, the nights longer, and the bonfires a whole lot bigger. Now, while the Vikings were busy convincing the sun to make a comeback party, they weren't just sitting around waiting for Odin's RSVP. Enter the Viking Longship, the sleek, elegant vessel of the seas, or as I like to call it, the Norse version of a winter road trip, minus the heated seats and GPS. These ships were engineering marvels, cutting through water like a hot knife through butter, but the reality of life aboard was more survival mode than luxury cruise. Picture this. You and your fellow Viking sailors are crammed onto a narrow, open deck, exposed to the elements with nothing but your woolen tunic and a prayer to keep warm. Forget about the romanticized image of fierce warriors with windswept hair. It was more like a group of hardy seafarers trying not to catch their death of cold. The longships were about 65 feet long and 15 feet wide, designed for speed and agility, not comfort. With zero privacy and no below-deck cabins, it was a communal experience in the truest sense, whether you liked it or not. These vessels weren't just for pillaging and plundering. They were economic workhorses. The Viking economy was heavily reliant on trade, and longships were the backbone of this system. They could carry up to 60 men, along with cargo ranging from furs and amber to slaves and silver. The Vikings were adept traders, bartering their wares from the icy coasts of the North Sea to the markets of Byzantium. But these voyages weren't just a jaunt across the pond. They were grueling, fraught with peril, and often took weeks or even months. The North Atlantic isn't exactly known for its hospitality, with storms that could send even the most seasoned sailor to a watery grave. And let's talk about the logistics. Sailing during the Yule season meant navigating through the harshest of conditions. The sun barely peeped over the horizon, leaving sailors with limited daylight to chart their course. Navigation was a mix of skill, experience, and a bit of luck. They used the sun, stars, and even migratory birds to find their way, but a cloudy sky could easily lead them astray. It was like trying to find your way home without Google Maps, and with the added risk of hypothermia. Food and supplies were another challenge. With no onboard kitchen or even the luxury of a packed lunch, the Vikings relied on dried fish, meat, and hard bread to sustain them. Not exactly a Michelin star experience. Fresh water was scarce, and ale was often consumed in its stead, alcohol being the lesser evil compared to dehydration. This isn't the kind of Christmas cheer you'd find in a holiday card, but it was a matter of life or death. Economically, these voyages were high risk, high reward. A successful raid or trade mission could bring back wealth beyond measure, but the odds were about as reliable as a Norse saga. The Vikings were pragmatic. They knew that each venture was a gamble, with nature holding all the aces. Yet the promise of riches and the allure of adventure spurred them on, even when the stakes were sky-high and the temperatures sub-zero. But let's not kid ourselves. Life aboard wasn't just about braving the elements and trading tales of glory. There was a social aspect too, albeit one that involved a lot of grumbling and shivering. The camaraderie formed under such harsh conditions was vital. It was a brotherhood forged in saltwater and frostbite, where each sailor depended on the others for survival. When you're in a floating tin can in the middle of nowhere, teamwork isn't just a nice bonus, it's essential. Despite the harsh realities, the myth of the Viking warrior sailor endures. Maybe it's the romantic notion of men battling the seas, or the allure of a life unchained from the ordinary. But make no mistake, this was a world where the line between legend and life was as thin as the ice on the fjords. The Vikings were masters of adaptation, turning survival into an art form, even during the bleakest of winters. So, next time you're grumbling about holiday travel, spare a thought for those hardy Norsemen who set sail into the unknown, armed with little more than courage, cunning, and the hope that the sun would shine once more. While the romantic notion of Viking warriors braving the high seas persists, let's pivot from oceanic odysseys to another core of Norse life: the gritty, sometimes gory, and often misunderstood rituals of sacrifice during Yule. Now, in your Hollywood-tinted glasses, you might see a Viking altar resembling a scene from a gore-fest film, animal carcasses strewn about like it's a medieval butcher shop. But let's hold the Viking apocalypse right there. The reality was more nuanced, blending religious devotion with practical survival. Sacrifice, in the Viking context, wasn't just about appeasing the gods with a bloodbath. It was about ensuring the community's continuity and prosperity. The Norse believed that offerings, especially during Yule, could curry favor with deities who controlled everything from the weather to the harvests. Now, before you envision axe-wielding chaos, remember this. The sacrifices were usually animals, cattle, horses, pigs. Think less Game of Thrones and more Norse Farmer's Almanac. Animals played a central role in Norse life, not just as potential sacrifices, but as vital resources. A single cow, for example, wasn't just a source of milk and meat, but a status symbol. It was like having a fancy sports car in medieval terms. So when the Vikings sacrificed a prized cow, they weren't just chucking away a beef brisket. They were making a serious investment, hoping to cash in on divine insurance for the coming year. It wasn't a slaughter. It was an economic decision wrapped in spiritual garb. Speaking of economics, these sacrifices were a high-stakes affair. A single horse could be worth a small fortune, especially in an era where livestock equaled livelihood. We're talking about an era where 20 sheep could be the equivalent of a down payment on the Viking equivalent of a condo. This wasn't a casual decision. Each sacrifice was a gamble, wagering their future against the whims of gods they revered and feared in equal measure. Now, let's address the elephant, or rather, the pig, in the room. Sacrifice in Viking society wasn't just a ritualistic bloodletting. It was a communal event, a chance for the village to gather, share, and collectively face the harsh winter months. It was a bit like a potluck if your neighbor brought a goat instead of potato salad. The blood from these sacrifices was often sprinkled on altars, idols, and even participants, symbolizing a shared bond with the divine. It was a mess, but a meaningful one, a reminder that survival was a community effort. Hollywood loves to paint Viking sacrifices as barbaric, but let's not give them all the credit for the drama. The sagas themselves, those epic tales of Norse heroics, had a flair for the dramatic. Written centuries after the Viking heyday, they were the medieval equivalent of a bestseller list. They often exaggerated events to entertain and to moralize, much like your favorite TV series that insists on a cliffhanger every season finale. But why all this focus on sacrifice during Yule? Part of it was timing. The winter solstice marked a period of darkness and uncertainty, a time when the sun played hard to get, and every day felt like it might be the last. Sacrifices were a hedge against this uncertainty, a way to say, "Hey gods, remember us, the ones freezing our butts off down here." It was a plea for mercy wrapped in ritual and necessity. The Norse gods were no strangers to sacrifice themselves. Odin, the All-Father, once sacrificed his eye for wisdom, a bold move that makes donating to charity look like child's play. The sagas tell us that the divine understood sacrifice, and this understanding was mirrored in mortal practices. It was a cosmic economy where offerings were the currency, and divine favor was the ultimate prize. Yet, despite the seriousness of these rituals, there was also room for celebration. The Yule season was a time for feasting, storytelling, and strengthening social bonds. The Vikings knew that the best way to face the cold was with a full belly and a heart warmed by camaraderie. They would gather around fires, sharing tales of gods and heroes and lessons from ancestors. These gatherings were just as critical as the sacrifices themselves, serving as a reminder that while the gods controlled the world, people controlled their communities. So next time you hear about Viking sacrifices, remember that beneath the blood and bone lies a story of survival, community, and hope. It wasn't just about courting the gods, but about binding people together in the face of a world that was as harsh as it was beautiful. The Vikings knew that life was a tapestry of myth and reality, woven together with the thread of necessity. They embraced both, knowing that in the end, it was their legacy, not the sacrifice, that would endure. As we delve further into Viking Yule, it's clear that while the myths paint a vivid picture, the reality was a tapestry of faith, survival, and community. Sacrifices were just one piece of this complex puzzle, a dance with the divine that ensured the continuity of life amidst the relentless Scandinavian winter. And while these practices might seem foreign to us now, they were a cornerstone of Viking culture, a testament to a people who thrived at the edge of the world. But hold on to your helmets, because there's more to explore beyond the sacrifices. The story of Viking Yule is far from over, with tales of feasting, legends, and the indomitable spirit of a people who turned the longest night into the dawn of a new year. In the meantime, as you sip your eggnog and hang your stockings, remember the Vikings, who faced the cold with courage, community, and perhaps a little more blood than your average holiday celebration. As the Vikings huddled around their fires, swapping tales and sharing the spoils of the hunt, they weren't just celebrating the survival of another year. Oh no, this was their version of a high-stakes poker game, where the chips were alliances and the pot was power. You see, the Yule gatherings were less about decking the halls and more about stacking the decks in your favor. Beneath the veneer of festive cheer lay a web of political maneuvering that would make even the most seasoned diplomat blush. Let's set the scene. The chieftains, jarls, and other bigwigs of Viking society gathered their clans, not just for a hearty feast, but for a strategic summit. These gatherings were the medieval equivalent of a G8 meeting, minus the translators and catered lunches. Amidst the mead and merriment, power plays were afoot. Alliances were forged and broken over cups of ale, and marriage proposals were tossed around like confetti. It was like Game of Thrones, without the dragons and slightly fewer backstabbings. The political landscape of the Norse world was as rugged and unpredictable as the fjords themselves. Clans were the building blocks of Viking society, each led by a chieftain who needed to maintain the loyalty of his warriors and the respect of his peers. It was a delicate balance, akin to juggling flaming torches while walking a tightrope. Yule was the perfect opportunity to solidify alliances through marriage, trade agreements, or good old-fashioned bribery. Forget about exchanging ugly sweaters. In Viking terms, a successful gift might be a plump pig or a well-crafted sword. Now, let's talk numbers. A single marriage alliance could unite hundreds of warriors under one banner, potentially tipping the scales in regional power struggles. The value of a good alliance was incalculable, but let's just say it was worth its weight in gold, literally. The dowries exchanged could include livestock, land, and treasure, enough to make even the most stoic Viking raise an eyebrow. But why all this fuss over alliances? Well, in the Viking Age, strength in numbers wasn't just a catchy slogan, it was a survival strategy. Clans needed to band together to fend off rivals, raid distant lands, and of course, impress the gods. The sagas are peppered with stories of feuding clans and ambitious chieftains, each trying to outmaneuver the other. It was a world where loyalty was as valuable as silver, and betrayal could lead to a one-way ticket to Valhalla, courtesy of an axe. These gatherings weren't just about forging new ties. They were also about patching up old rifts. Feuds were as common as cold winters, and Yule provided the perfect backdrop for reconciliation, or at least a ceasefire until the spring thaw. It was a chance to put down the swords, pick up a horn of mead, and toast to a future where no one ended up on the wrong side of a skirmish. In a society where honor was everything, a public truce at Yule was a way to save face and avoid unnecessary bloodshed. While the chieftains were busy playing their political chess games, the rest of the clan wasn't just sitting around twiddling their thumbs. Yule was a time for the community to come together, share resources, and prepare for the long winter ahead. It was a reminder that while the gods might control the weather, it was up to the people to control their fate. Social bonds were strengthened, disputes were settled, and everyone left with a sense of unity, at least until the snow melted and old grudges thawed. Now, before you picture a scene of harmonious Viking comeback, remember this: the tensions simmered beneath the surface. The Vikings were a competitive bunch, and Yule was as much about one-upmanship as it was about unity. A well-timed boast or a particularly impressive gift could elevate a chieftain's status and secure his position for another year. It was a balancing act of bravado and diplomacy, with reputations hanging in the balance. The myth of the noble, fearless Viking persists, but the reality was a complex dance of power, politics, and pragmatism. Yule was a microcosm of this world, a time to celebrate, yes, but also a time to strategize. The Vikings knew that the long winter nights were best faced together, but they also knew that alliances could shift as quickly as the northern winds. So, as you deck your halls and hang your mistletoe, remember the Vikings who gathered not just to survive the winter, but to navigate the treacherous waters of politics and power. Their Yule was a time of both celebration and calculation, a reminder that in the harsh Scandinavian world, survival was a team sport, and the stakes were always high. But while the Vikings were busy playing political chess during Yule, the seeds of change were being sown, seeds that would eventually transform this rugged festival into the Christmas we recognize today. This metamorphosis didn't happen overnight, mind you, more like a slow-cooked stew than a flash-fried feast. Let's take a journey through time and see how Yule evolved, step by step. Into the holiday, we now bombard with tinsel and second-rate pop songs. Christianity, with all its pomp and circumstance, began to creep into Viking territories around the 8th century like an uninvited guest at a party. And by the 11th century, it was more like a relative who'd moved in and redecorated the place. The Norse gods quietly took a back seat as this new religion made its mark, and Yule was no exception. The Church, with its knack for assimilating local traditions, saw Yule as an excellent opportunity to spread the Christian message, much like how you might sneak vegetables into a picky eater's meal. The winter solstice festivities of Yule were gradually folded into the Christmas celebration. The transition was as subtle as a Viking raiding party, meaning not very subtle at all. By the time the 12th century rolled around, Yule was largely synonymous with Christmas, albeit still retaining a few of its pagan quirks. The Church wisely kept some of the more popular elements, like feasting and gift-giving, and put a Christian spin on them to make the transition palatable to the Norse people. Now, you might wonder why certain Viking customs survived this cultural overhaul, while others were left on history's cutting room floor. The answer lies in the adaptability of traditions and their ability to resonate across different cultures. Take the Yule log, for instance. Originally a massive piece of wood meant to burn throughout the solstice, it symbolized warmth and light in the dark of winter. This concept was easily adopted into the Christmas tradition, eventually becoming the decorative and culinary versions we know today, a testament to the enduring appeal of fire and chocolate. But what about the more, shall we say, colorful aspects of Viking Yule? Sacrifices, for instance, didn't quite make the cut. The Church wasn't too fond of bloodletting as a holiday pastime, preferring instead the bloodless sacrifice of a good sermon. Instead, the idea of sacrifice morphed into the more benign tradition of giving and sharing, turning the ancient ritualistic offerings into the charitable spirit associated with Christmas. Even Odin, the one-eyed wanderer of Norse mythology, got a makeover. The jolly old man in red we know as Santa Claus is partly inspired by Odin, who was said to ride across the sky on his 8-legged horse, Sleipnir. Fast forward a few centuries, and this image melded with folklore from St. Nicholas and other European traditions to create the Santa we now recognize a benevolent gift-giver rather than a warrior deity. So, how did these transformations affect the people? Economically, the shift from pagan to Christian traditions had tangible impacts. The church's influence often meant more organized, communal celebrations, which in turn could boost local economies. Markets would swell with activity as people prepared for the holiday, not unlike the frantic consumerism we see today. In a sense, the church's structuring of Christmas as a significant event likely laid the groundwork for the commercial holiday season we experience now, albeit with less emphasis on reindeer and more on religious observance. Politically, the assimilation of Yule into Christmas helped to consolidate power. Aligning Yule with Christmas allowed the church to standardize celebrations across its expanding territories, reinforcing its authority and bringing disparate communities together under a common banner. It was a savvy move, harnessing the power of tradition to unify and expand influence, a strategy as old as time, dressed in new robes. Socially, this blend of traditions helped ease the cultural transition from paganism to Christianity. By incorporating familiar elements of Yule, such as feast days and communal gatherings, the church made Christianity more accessible and appealing to the Norse. It's a classic case of if you can't beat them, join them, or in this case, let them join you. Yet, despite this religious and cultural makeover, the essence of Yule, the celebration of light in the darkness, the importance of community, and the acknowledgement of forces greater than oneself, remains. These core elements have persisted through the centuries, partly because they speak to fundamental human experiences. Whether it's huddling together for warmth in a Viking longhouse or gathering around a Christmas tree in the family living room, the traditions serve as a reminder of our shared humanity, transcending time and belief systems. So, what's the takeaway from all this historical reshuffling? Perhaps it's that traditions are like the Vikings themselves, adaptable, resilient, and always ready for a bit of reinvention. As we hang our stockings and light our Christmas trees, we're participating in a tradition that's been centuries in the making, a tapestry of myth, reality, and cultural exchange. While we might not face the same existential threats as the Vikings, the spirit of Yule lives on, reminding us that even in the darkest of times, there's light to be found and shared. In the end, the transformation of Yule into Christmas is a testament to the enduring nature of human tradition. The Vikings, with their penchant for survival and celebration, have left an indelible mark on the holiday season. So as you sip your eggnog and revel in the warmth of the season, remember the hardy Norsemen who braved winter's wrath and turned darkness into an occasion for joy. They may not have had jingle bells, but they knew how to party like it was 999. And there you have it, the journey of Yule from its rugged Viking roots to the twinkling lights of modern Christmas. It's a story of adaptation, survival, and the enduring human spirit, proving that while customs may change, the heart of the celebration remains steadfast. So next time you hear sleigh bells or see the glow of holiday lights, know that you're part of a legacy that stretches back to the icy fjords and firelit gatherings of the Vikings. A merry Yule, or rather, a very merry Christmas to all. If you were to roll back the clock to around 814 BC, you'd find a buzzing little spot on the North African coast where a group of Phoenician settlers decided to set up shop. That spot, folks, was Carthage, destined to become a powerhouse of trade and a thorn in Rome's side. But before it tangled with Roman legions, Carthage was all about building its empire with trade, not swords. Carthage had a prime piece of real estate, the Mediterranean coastline. It's like owning beachfront property in the ancient world, except instead of sunbathers, you had ships laden with goods breezing by. The Mediterranean Sea was the highway of the ancients, with Carthage sitting smack dab in the middle of the action, ready to cash in on the flow of goods like a toll booth on a busy interstate. Now, the Phoenicians, Carthage's ancestors, were no strangers to trade. They were the original seagoing entrepreneurs, having already established a reputation for sailing the high seas and trading everything from cedar wood to the much-coveted purple dye. This dye wasn't just any color, it was the color of royalty, extracted painstakingly from the murex snail. Picture this, thousands of snails for just a gram of dye. It was the Gucci of the ancient world, except it didn't come with a logo, just a hefty price tag. Carthage inherited this love for the open seas and commerce from the Phoenicians, who must have had salt water in their veins. While the Phoenicians were the original creators, Carthage took the concept and put it on steroids. They established a bustling harbor, a marvel of urban planning that would make even a modern city planner swoon. This wasn't just a place to park your ship. It was a complex with docks, warehouses, and a military port, the Carthon, that could house more than 220 ships. It was kind of like a multi-story parking lot, but for boats. As Carthage found its sea legs, it began to weave a web of trade routes that stretched across the Mediterranean. You could almost imagine the map of their trade routes looking like some ancient version of a subway map, except instead of stops like Times Square or Waterloo, you had Tyre, Gades, and Sardinia. They traded with the Greeks, the Egyptians, and even ventured as far west as modern-day Spain. It was all about connecting the dots, and Carthage was the dart connector extraordinaire. But why did this all matter? Well, in the ancient world, wealth wasn't measured by what you could hoard, but by what you could trade. The more connections you had, the more goods you could move, and the richer you became. Carthage understood this well and used its strategic location to become a middleman in the Mediterranean, a role that brought both prosperity and jealous rivals. Now, let's talk numbers. Carthage was pulling in goods from all over, metals from Spain, grain from Sicily, and luxury items like ivory and slaves from Africa. Their fleet was the backbone of this operation, a seafaring juggernaut that could rival any naval power of the day. It's said that at its height, Carthage had a population of about 400,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in the ancient world. And with wealth came influence, which is why Carthage's story is a tale of both commerce and conflict. Carthage's trading partners were a colorful bunch, with the Phoenicians being the most significant early collaborators. The Phoenicians were the OGs of trade, and Carthage was the eager apprentice ready to take over the family business. Together, they worked the seas like seasoned pros, turning the Mediterranean into a bustling marketplace. Of course, trade isn't just about goods, it's about power. Control the trade routes, and you control the economic lifeblood of the region. The Romans, who would later clash with Carthage, understood this all too well. But in the early days, Carthage was the undisputed master of the Mediterranean, a position built on savvy trade and strategic alliances. So, what's the real story here? Carthage wasn't just a city. It was a commercial empire built on the backs of merchants and sailors, with a keen eye for opportunities and a willingness to take risks. It was a place where trade was king, and every ship that sailed into its harbor was a testament to its far-reaching influence. Carthage was less about the romance of adventure and more about the relentless pursuit of profit, a lesson in ancient economics that still resonates today. In the end, Carthage's early success was no accident. It was clever urban planning, strategic location, and an inherited knack for trade that set the stage for its rise. As we delve deeper into Carthage's story, remember this. Behind every great empire is a fleet of ships and a ledger full of transactions. Carthage knew this well, and it's why their legacy continues to capture our imagination, even centuries later. As Carthage's ships sailed out to every corner of the Mediterranean, each vessel was like a floating bank vault, carrying the currency of power, trade goods. But let's not get too misty-eyed over the romance of the high seas. The reality was less about adventure and more about cold, hard economics. Carthage's financial acumen was legendary, yet not the fairy tale of limitless wealth some might imagine. Sure, they were rolling in goods, but every coin had two sides, and the reverse was all about risk and investment. Let's dive into some numbers. The Carthaginians traded in silver and gold, the bling of the ancient world, which were not just shiny metals but the backbone of their economy. Silver, primarily sourced from the mines of Iberia, modern-day Spain, was like the Bitcoin of its time. It was volatile, valuable, and everyone wanted a piece. Gold was another prized commodity, often acquired through trade with African tribes and used to grease the wheels of commerce. But here's the kicker. Carthage wasn't just hoarding these metals like a dragon on its pile of treasure. They were smartly investing them back into their trade networks, ensuring their ships could keep those trade winds filled with sails. Speaking of ships, let's talk logistics. A Carthaginian merchant vessel could carry around 100 tons of cargo, the ancient equivalent of a semi-truck. These ships were the unsung heroes, traversing distances that would make today's shipping magnates blush. The journey from Carthage to Gades, now Cadiz in Spain, for instance, was about 500 kilometers, a trip that required skilled navigation and a bit of luck with the weather guards. Depending on conditions, this could take weeks, and every day at sea was a roll of the dice. Pirates, storms, and the armed Roman patrol added to the excitement. Transporting grain from Sicily or metals from Iberia wasn't just about loading up a ship and setting sail. Each voyage was a calculated gamble. Grain was bulky and cheap, but it was also a staple, the bread and butter, literally, of the Mediterranean diet. Shipping it was low risk, low reward, akin to betting on a slow but steady horse. Tin, on the other hand, was more like the thoroughbred, high stakes with higher returns. Tin was crucial for making bronze, that ever-popular ancient alloy, and fetching it from places like Cornwall in Britain was not a jaunt but a marathon. The logistics were a masterclass in balancing risk and reward. Now, let's not forget the human element. The sailors and merchants were the lifeblood of this operation, and they weren't just in it for the thrill of adventure. No, they were the blue-collar workers of the ancient world, the real MVPs who kept the wheels of commerce turning. Life at sea was no picnic. Aside from the constant threat of drowning, there was disease, malnutrition, and the occasional spat with hostile locals. But these guys were tough, with sea legs as steady as their resolve. They had to be, because each voyage was a financial tightrope walk, and falling off meant you might not get a second chance. Carthaginian merchants, unlike their Roman counterparts, were private entrepreneurs. This meant they bore the brunt of any losses, but also reaped the rewards. And therein lay the genius of Carthaginian trade, decentralization. By allowing merchants to operate independently, Carthage tapped into a network of innovation and risk-taking that fueled their economy. The state, of course, took its cut. Taxes have always been as certain as death. But the system encouraged a kind of proto-capitalism that was ahead of its time. While the legends paint Carthage as floating in endless riches, the reality was a bit more down-to-earth. Balancing the books required savvy, courage, and a constant calculation of risk versus reward. Carthaginian merchants were the hedge fund managers of antiquity, their ledgers filled with profits and losses, their ships the instruments of trade that made it all possible. They understood that wealth wasn't just about accumulation, but about circulation, moving goods, reinvesting profits, and keeping the economy dynamic. So, what does this tell us? Carthage's success was no fluke. It was a complex interplay of geography, economic strategy, and human grit. The Carthaginians were less romantic adventurers and more hard-nosed businessmen, their sails filled with the winds of opportunity. As their ships crisscrossed the Mediterranean, they weren't just moving goods. They were crafting a legacy that would outlast even the mightiest of empires. But the story of Carthage is far from over. There's more to uncover about this trading powerhouse, and next time we'll dive deeper into the alliances and rivalries that shaped its fortune. Stay tuned. As we sail forward into the saga of Carthage, let's talk about how this ancient powerhouse stretched its commercial tentacles into the lands of Iberia and Africa. This wasn't just a case of, hey, let's go see what's over there. No, Carthage's expansion was a masterclass in strategy, politics, and let's face it, a bit of audacity. First up, Iberia, or what we now call Spain. Carthage had its eyes on this region like a kid eyeing the last slice of pizza. And why not? Iberia was a treasure trove of minerals, with silver mines that glimmered like a banker's dream. The silver from these mines wasn't just about personal wealth. It was the hard currency that powered Carthage's vast trade network. So, naturally, Carthage had to secure its claim. The trick? A blend of diplomacy and good old-fashioned military might. Carthage wasn't just sailing over and knocking on doors. They sent Hamilcar Barca, a military commander who was as smooth with political negotiations as he was with a sword. By forging alliances with local Iberian tribes, Hamilcar essentially built a Carthaginian stronghold in the region. This wasn't just about control. It was about integrating Iberia into Carthage's economic sphere. Think of it as an ancient version of a corporate merger, with the silver mines as the prize acquisition. Turning south, Carthage also looked to Africa, their own backyard, where they expanded their influence with a mix of trade and treaties. They weren't just trading trinkets, they were after the big stuff: gold, ivory, slaves. Gold, especially, was the golden ticket, pun intended, for maintaining their economic prestige. It came from places like the Senegal and Niger regions, and acquiring it meant navigating not just geographic distances, but also complex tribal politics. And now for the elephant in the room, literally. Hannibal's elephants have achieved a mythical status, almost like the unicorns of antiquity. But let's get real. These weren't just the majestic beasts of legend. They were also practical tools of war and occasionally trade. In the land campaigns, they were like ancient tanks, massive, intimidating, and capable of breaking enemy lines. But in reality, they were also logistical nightmares. Feeding, transporting, and managing these behemoths was no small feat. Imagine trying to parallel park a dozen elephants in a crowded city. Chaos, to say the least. The romanticized image is of Hannibal crossing the Alps, elephants in tow, like a scene straight out of an epic movie. But let's bust that myth a bit. First off, these weren't the African elephants we might be picturing. They were likely the now extinct North African forest elephants, smaller and more manageable, and the famous Alps crossing, a logistical quagmire that resulted in significant losses. These elephants were less about practical military use and more about psychological warfare. The sight of an elephant charging toward you in battle was enough to send most soldiers running for the hills. So, why the elephants? Well, they were a symbol of Carthage's reach and ambition, a message to both allies and enemies that Carthage was not to be trifled with. In trade, they were less practical, but served as a kind of diplomatic gift, a sign of goodwill or intimidation, depending on the recipient. Imagine receiving a live elephant as a token of friendship. Talk about a conversation starter. Now, let's talk politics. Carthage didn't just rely on brute force and animal spectacle to maintain its trade routes. They were savvy negotiators, understanding that alliances could be just as powerful as armies. The city-state was a master of the art of the deal long before anyone else claimed the phrase. They played a balancing act, maintaining peace with some tribes while strategically overpowering others. In Iberia, for instance, the Barcid family, Hamilcar, Hasdrubal, and eventually Hannibal, essentially ran the show, establishing a quasi-dynasty that secured Carthage's interests. They weren't just military leaders, they were administrators, setting up systems to tax and manage the local economies. It was an early form of colonial governance, with Carthage as the distant overseer, pulling the strings from across the sea. Meanwhile, in Africa, Carthage wasn't merely exploiting resources, but was often involved in cultural exchanges that enriched both sides. They introduced advanced farming techniques, new crafts, and in return, absorbed local knowledge and goods. This wasn't a one-way street. It was a bustling exchange of ideas and commodities that benefited both Carthage and its trading partners. So, what does this tell us about Carthage? Here was a city-state that understood the power of both hard and soft influence. They could send in the troops when necessary, but more often than not, they preferred to negotiate their way to dominance. They didn't just conquer territories. They integrated them into a vast economic system that was as sophisticated as it was expansive. And it worked, at least for a time. Carthage's approach to trade and politics helped it become one of the most powerful entities in the ancient world. But every empire has its weaknesses, and Carthage was no exception. In their quest for expansion, they made enemies, big ones like Rome. And while the elephants, the silver, and the gold made for a grand story, the reality was that Carthage's success was built on a precarious balance of diplomacy and military might. As we wrap up this leg of our journey, remember that Carthage was more than just a collection of ships and soldiers. It was an intricate web of economic and political connections, a testament to the power of trade and strategy. Yet, the story of Carthage is far from over. We've only scratched the surface of its complex history, and as we continue, we'll uncover more about its rise and eventual fall. Stay with us as we explore the next chapters of this fascinating tale of ambition, innovation, and a touch of hubris. As we continue our journey through the bustling world of Carthage, let's zoom in on the real movers and shakers, the people who turned this city from a trading outpost into a Mediterranean heavyweight. We're talking about the merchants, the elites and the laborers, the unsung heroes and the unsung, well, tyrants of the ancient world. First up, the merchants. These guys were the rock stars of Carthage, albeit with less screaming fans and more calculating ledgers. Think of them as the Jeff Bezos of the ancient world, minus the space rockets. They were the ones who braved the high seas, navigating more than just water but a complex web of trade deals, tariffs, and taxes. The Carthaginian merchant was not just a trader but an adventurer, a diplomat, and sometimes a pirate, all rolled into one. But let's not get too misty-eyed. These merchants weren't exactly the democratic darlings of the day. They were more like the venture capitalists of antiquity, wielding significant power and influence. The allure of trade wealth was real, but it wasn't spread around like confetti at a parade. The merchant class held a monopoly on the good life, their wealth creating a clear social divide. The rich got richer and the rest, well, they got to watch. Speaking of wealth, let's talk numbers. A successful merchant could rake in profits that would make a modern-day hedge fund manager blush. We're talking thousands of silver shekels per voyage, enough to buy a villa with a view and still have change for a few amphorae of wine. But as in any good story, there's a catch. The stakes were high, and one bad storm or a run-in with pirates could send a merchant's fortunes sinking faster than you can say, phonician. Now, onto the elites. These were the folks who lived in the lap of luxury, sipping wine while lounging in their opulent homes, draped in the finest Tyrian purple. They were the oligarchs, wielding power like a child with a new toy, unpredictably, and with little regard for the common folk. Carthaginian society was less about equal opportunity and more about cementing one's status. Wealth from trade didn't just buy luxury, it bought influence in the political arena. The Maganid dynasty, for instance, was a family of merchant princes who held sway over both commerce and politics. Their wealth wasn't just measured in silver, but in power, real, tangible power that decided the fate of the city. They were the gatekeepers, ensuring that their interests were always front and center. Democracy? Not quite. It was more like a members-only club where the price of entry was steep. But let's not forget the laborers, the backbone of this economic marvel. These were the folks who did the heavy lifting, quite literally. From shipbuilders to dockworkers, they made sure the gears of commerce kept turning. Yet for all their hard work, their rewards were meager, enough to keep them going but not enough to elevate them from their station. The laborers lived in the shadow of the wealth they helped create, a stark reminder that trade wealth was far from evenly distributed. And then there's the elephant in the room, Carthaginian religious practices. Now, you might be wondering what religion has to do with trade. Quite a bit, actually. The Carthaginians were deeply religious, and their faith permeated every aspect of life, including commerce. They believed that the gods had a direct hand in their fortunes, and offerings were made to ensure safe voyages and prosperous returns. But here's where things get dicey. Carthaginian religion had a dark side, human sacrifice. The very mention can send shivers down modern spines, but let's delve into the details. The practice was controversial even in antiquity, with reports of child sacrifice at the Tafet, an open-air sanctuary. Archaeologists have found urns containing the cremated remains of infants and animals, suggesting that the tales might not be entirely fictional. The question is, why? For the Carthaginians, it was about appeasing the gods, ensuring favor in trade and battle. In a world where life was precarious and the gods capricious, such sacrifices were seen as a necessary evil to secure divine protection. It's a harsh reality of the ancient world, where the lines between faith and superstition blurred, leading to practices that modern sensibilities find abhorrent. But before we cast judgment, consider the context. Carthage was a city constantly under threat, be it from rival powers or the unpredictable sea. In such a world, the promise of divine favor was a powerful motivator. While we can debunk the myths of Carthaginian cruelty, the reality is that their religious practices were a complex part of their identity, interwoven with their success and survival. So, what does this all tell us about Carthage? It paints a picture of a society that was both prosperous and precarious, where the pursuit of trade wealth created clear social divides. A city where merchants ruled the waves, elites ruled the roost, and laborers kept the whole thing afloat. And where religion, with all its complexities, played a crucial role in the commercial and cultural identity. As we sail further into the story of Carthage, remember that behind the glittering facade of trade wealth was a city grappling with its own contradictions. A place where the promise of prosperity was as alluring as it was elusive, and where the ancient dance between faith and commerce played out on a grand stage. Stay tuned as we continue this riveting tale of ambition, power, and a touch of controversy. Which brings us, dear listeners, to the grand finale of our Carthaginian saga, the Punic Wars. If Carthage was the high-stakes poker player of the ancient world, then Rome was the cunning adversary who knew all the tricks. These wars were not just a clash of titans, but a seismic shift in the ancient Mediterranean, reshaping political landscapes and rewriting the rules of power. The First Punic War kicked off in 264 BC, a 23-year marathon that could give any modern military campaign a run for its money. Carthage, with its formidable navy, clashed with Rome in a struggle for control over Sicily. Now, Sicily wasn't just a sunny island with great canali. It was a strategic gold mine, offering grain supplies and a stepping stone for further expansion. The cost of this war was staggering, with Carthage losing around 200 ships in the Battle of Cape Ecnomus alone, one of the largest naval battles in history. Despite Carthage's naval prowess, Rome's innovative tactics turned the tide. They built a fleet from scratch, using captured Carthaginian ships as models, and introduced the corvus, a boarding device that turned sea battles into land skirmishes, where Roman legions excelled. It was like bringing a gladiator match to the high seas. The war dragged on with costly stalemates and maritime disasters, but in the end, Rome emerged victorious, forcing Carthage to cede Sicily and pay hefty reparations. Fast forward to the Second Punic War, and we meet Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian commander who became a living legend. Picture this. 218 BC, Hannibal crosses the Alps with a motley crew of soldiers, and yes, those infamous elephants. It's the ancient equivalent of a rock band on tour, minus the groupies. Hannibal's audacious move shocked the Romans, and for a moment it seemed Carthage might just pull off the comeback of the century. But while Hannibal scored impressive victories on Italian soil, including the devastating Battle of Cannae in 216 BC, he faced a harsh truth. Winning battles isn't the same as winning wars. Rome's resilience was legendary, their ability to replenish troops and resources seemingly endless. Carthage, meanwhile, was stretched thin, fighting on multiple fronts with dwindling resources. Hannibal's plea for reinforcements from Carthage fell on deaf ears, as the city was embroiled in political squabbles and hesitant to commit more resources. It was like watching a high-stakes chess game where one player is running out of pieces. Ultimately, it was Rome's strategic genius, led by Scipio Africanus, that sealed Carthage's fate. In 202 BC, at the Battle of Zama, Scipio outmaneuvered Hannibal, delivering a decisive blow that ended the Second Punic War. Carthage was left battered and humiliated, stripped of its empire, and forced into a crippling peace treaty. But the final nail in the coffin came with the Third Punic War in 149 BC, a brutal conflict that culminated in the complete destruction of Carthage in 146 BC. Rome, not content with just defeating Carthage, decided to erase it, literally. The city was razed, its lands salted to prevent future habitation, and its people sold into slavery. Now, let's debunk a persistent myth, that Rome's destruction of Carthage was an act of sheer spite. While the narrative of Rome sowing salt in the fields makes for a dramatic tale, there's little evidence to support it. The reality was more about securing control and eliminating a rival once and for all. Carthage's economic and military potential posed a threat, and Rome, pragmatic to the core, opted for a permanent solution. But here's the kicker. Despite its obliteration, Carthage's influence didn't vanish with its walls. Its legacy endured, echoing through the corridors of history. Carthaginian innovations in trade and urban planning laid foundations that future civilizations would build upon. Even after its fall, Carthage's former territories remained vital trade hubs under Roman control, a testament to its lasting economic impact. So, what can we learn from Carthage's rise and fall? For starters, it reminds us that power is a precarious perch. Carthage's story is a cautionary tale of overreach and the limits of ambition. They were masters of trade, but their inability to transition from a commercial to a military superpower left them vulnerable. In a world where might often made right, Carthage's reliance on wealth over warfare was both their strength and their Achilles heel. Yet, Carthage's legacy offers more than just lessons in caution. It highlights the enduring power of innovation and adaptation. Their trade networks were marvels of logistics and diplomacy, and their economic strategies were ahead of their time. Carthage, was a pioneer of global commerce, setting the stage for the interconnected economies we see today. They understood the art of the deal long before it became a catchphrase, proving that in the ancient world, as in the modern one, fortune favored the bold. And let's not forget the cultural exchanges that Carthage facilitated. Their interactions with diverse peoples enriched the Mediterranean tapestry, fostering a blend of ideas, goods, and traditions that transcended borders. Carthage was a melting pot, a place where cultures converged and influenced one another, leaving a legacy that outshone their military defeats. As we wrap up this odyssey through Carthaginian history, remember that their story, like all great tales, is a mix of triumph and tragedy. They soared to heights few dared dream of, only to fall in a blaze of glory. But in their rise and fall, Carthage left an indelible mark on the world, a reminder that even in defeat there can be lasting influence. So, next time you ponder the ebb and flow of empires or the intricate dance of trade and politics, think of Carthage. Their story is not just about what was lost, but what was gained, a testament to human ingenuity and the relentless pursuit of prosperity. Carthage may have been silenced, but its echoes still resonate, a whisper from the past that continues to inspire and caution in equal measure. In the bustling heart of ancient Rome, where emperors schemed and gladiators entertained, there was a festival that made even the most grandiose Roman orgy look like a quiet dinner party. Welcome to Saturnalia, the festival that gave December its reputation for wildness long before eggnog and ugly sweaters ever entered the picture. This was a time when the usual rigid Roman hierarchy did a complete somersault, leaving citizens and slaves alike with a cultural hangover that would echo through the ages. Let's dive into the origins of Saturnalia, a holiday that started off as a modest agricultural festival dedicated to Saturn, the Roman god of agriculture and time. But as with many things Roman, what began humbly soon grew into a massive, multi-day extravaganza. Initially set on December 17th, the festival eventually stretched over a week, because apparently Romans knew that one day of revelry just wasn't enough. By 217 BC, the Romans were already rolling out the red carpet for a holiday that would set the stage for our modern Christmas. But what kind of society thought it was a good idea to flip its social order in such a spectacular way? In Rome, a city built on the backs of its conquered, the daily grind was a rigid affair. Patricians ruled, plebeians toiled, and slaves, well, they knew their place all too well. But during Saturnalia, it was as if the universe hit pause and cranked up the chaos dial. Slaves were allowed to don the toga of their masters, a sartorial swap that was both symbolic and hilarious. Imagine your boss handing you their corner office and telling you to run wild. And while these role reversals were largely symbolic, they offered a glimpse of a world turned upside down, if only temporarily. Now, let's talk about those Roman emperors who knew how to use Saturnalia to their advantage. Take Emperor Augustus, for example, who was as skilled in public relations as he was in expanding the empire. He understood the power of public opinion long before hashtags and trending topics. By embracing Saturnalia's chaos, Augustus could present himself as a benevolent ruler, a man of the people, even as he consolidated power with an iron fist. The festival became an annual opportunity for emperors to distract the populace from any unpleasant political realities simmering beneath the surface. But it wasn't all fun and games. The extravagance of Saturnalia came with a hefty price tag. Just like today's holiday shopping sprees can leave your wallet gasping for air, these ancient festivities were a financial burden for many Romans. The feasts were epic, the wine flowed freely, and gifts were exchanged with wild abandon. In fact, the poet Martial noted that the usual gifts during Saturnalia included everything from expensive clothing to exotic animals. And nothing says, "Happy Saturnalia," quite like a leopard in your atrium. Despite its chaotic charm, Saturnalia wasn't just an ancient Roman version of the Purge, with added merriment. It was a complex cultural event that mixed genuine goodwill with strategic politics. Romans were savvy, and they knew how to throw a party that would keep people talking for centuries. But behind the laughter and the role reversals, there was a society grappling with its own contradictions. A civilization that celebrated freedom for a week while maintaining a strict social order the rest of the year. As the festival grew, so did its cultural significance. It became a time to honor Saturn and let off steam before the long winter months. This was more than a mere release valve. It was a way for Romans to engage with their gods, their society, and each other in a way that was uniquely their own. Saturnalia was not just a festival. It was a reflection of the Roman world, a world where the line between divine and mortal, master and slave, was blurred in the most colorful of ways. So, as we wrap up this first look at Saturnalia, remember that it wasn't just about the toga-clad revelry or the boisterous feasts. It was a snapshot of a complex society in flux, a society that could let its hair down and laugh at itself, if only for a short while. And as the echoes of Saturnalia ring through our modern holiday traditions, from our own gift-giving to our festive excesses, it's a reminder that even in ancient times, people knew how to celebrate the end of a year with style, substance, and just a touch of madness. Now, let's pull back the curtain and take a good look at the spectacle that was Saturnalia, with all its garish attire and notorious gift-giving traditions. If you thought the modern holiday season was a cacophony of consumerism, ancient Rome set the bar high. Like really high. Picture a city where the streets were awash with vibrant colors, Romans wearing their finest and most flamboyant attire, shedding their everyday whites for something that screamed, "Look at me." Even the slaves, usually confined to drab tunics, got in on the sartorial action. This was a time for them to flaunt their freedom, even if it was just for a week. Speaking of freedom, let's talk about the gifts. Oh yes, the Romans knew how to throw a proper gift exchange. Forget about scented candles or socks. We're talking about items that could bankrupt a small province. Think exotic animals, luxurious fabrics, and even the occasional work of art. The poet Martial, ever the commentator on Roman excess, quipped about the range of gifts, from the modest to the exorbitant, a toga for the poor, a mansion for the rich. It was an economic free-for-all, and everyone was expected to participate, lest they be labeled a Scrooge of their time. But this wasn't just about generosity or goodwill. It was an unwritten social contract, a way to display wealth and social standing. Sure, it sounds romantic, this idea of giving out of the goodness of one's heart, but dig a little deeper, and you'll find a society driven by status and obligation. The pressure to partake was immense, and skipping out on gift-giving was akin to social suicide. You'd be the one whispered about in the baths, the one not invited to the next big feast. And let's be real, in a city as socially charged as Rome, that could be the kiss of death for anyone's ambitions. And what about the economic whirlwind this created? Imagine the Roman markets during Saturnalia. It was chaos, with merchants hawking everything from garlands to gourmet delights. Prices soared naturally, because demand was off the charts. The economy was on a sugar high, much like your local mall in December. This influx of commerce was a boon for some but a bane for others. The rich could afford to splash out, but for the average Roman, this was a time to watch the denarii fly out the window faster than you could say, "Io Saturnalia." But let's not get too swept up in the romanticism of it all. The reality was a bit more practical. Many Romans, especially those of modest means, had to budget their Saturnalia splurges carefully. They couldn't rely on credit cards, after all. This was a cash economy, and once the purse was empty, it stayed that way until the next payday. It's a reminder that even in ancient times, the financial strain of holiday merriment was all too real. So, what we have here is a fascinating blend of tradition and commerce, of genuine festivity and societal pressure. Saturnalia wasn't just a party. It was a microcosm of Roman life itself, reflecting the city's vibrancy and its underlying tensions. It was about more than just the laughter and the role reversals. It was a balancing act between freedom and duty, pleasure and practicality. As we look back on Saturnalia, it's easy to see the appeal that keeps its legend alive. Who wouldn't be captivated by a festival where the rules of society were tossed out the window and everyone, for just a moment, could dream of a life less ordinary? But, as we've seen, the reality was a bit more nuanced. It was a celebration layered with complexity, where the line between genuine joy and societal obligation was as thin as a Roman toga. And there you have it, the colorful, chaotic, and utterly compelling world of Saturnalia. As we gear up for our own holiday season, perhaps we can take a leaf out of the Romans' book. Maybe it's about finding that sweet spot between excess and enjoyment, between giving and receiving, between the myth and the reality. After all, isn't that what makes history so endlessly fascinating? And speaking of finding that sweet spot, let's peel back the layers of Saturnalia to uncover the religious and philosophical roots that made this festival more than just an ancient Roman rager. You see, behind all the merriment and role reversals, Saturnalia had some serious celestial weight. At its core, this was a festival dedicated to Saturn, the Roman god of agriculture and time, a deity that had more layers than a lasagna. Saturn was a big deal. Think of him as the deity who'd give even Father Time a run for his money. In Roman mythology, Saturn presided over a golden age, a utopian era of abundance and peace, which made him the perfect symbol for a festival aimed at flipping the societal script. Now, why December 17th, you ask? Well, it's all about the agricultural calendar. Back in the day, before supermarkets and kale smoothies, agriculture was the lifeblood of Roman society. The festival's timing was no accident. It coincided with the end of the planting season and the onset of winter. This was a time to kick back, celebrate the harvest, and hope you stored enough grain to last until the next planting season. Essentially, Saturnalia was the ancient equivalent of a farmer kicking off their muddy boots and toasting to a year of hard work. But wait, there's more. Saturnalia wasn't just about agriculture. There was a philosophical angle, too. Stoicism and Epicureanism were all the rage in Roman intellectual circles, much like debating the merits of cold brew versus espresso today. The Stoics, with their stiff upper lip and focus on virtue, probably saw Saturnalia as a chance to practice acceptance and resilience in the face of chaos. On the other hand, the Epicureans, who believed in pursuing pleasure, in moderation, might have seen it as an opportunity to indulge a little without letting things spiral out of control. Think of it as philosophical cross-draining, a little chaos to keep you on your toes. Of course, no discussion of Saturnalia would be complete without a nod to the political theatrics. Roman emperors were nothing if not savvy, and they knew how to milk Saturnalia for all it was worth. This was a chance to cozy up to the populace, to play the part of the magnanimous ruler. Take Emperor Nero, for instance. He was the kind of guy who'd throw a lavish party and then set the city on fire just to see how it looked in the moonlight. During Saturnalia, he could momentarily drop the tyrant act and present himself as a man of the people, even as he plotted his next power grab. The festival also offered emperors a chance to align themselves with divine favor. By associating themselves with Saturn, emperors could tap into the god's reputation for abundance and golden age glory. It was a classic case of guilt by association, except, in a good way. And let's not forget the optics. A well-timed festival could distract the masses from the latest tax hike or military blunder. Keep the wine flowing, and the people won't notice the cracks in the empire's foundations, or so the thinking went. But let's not get too carried away with the romanticism. For every tale of benevolent emperors basking in divine glow, there are accounts that suggest this was more about political survival than genuine goodwill. The historical records are full of contradictions, and separating fact from fiction is like trying to untangle a Roman's toga after a night of Saturnalian revelry. Take the accounts of Emperor Caligula, who, according to some sources, used Saturnalia as an excuse to indulge his darker impulses. Was he truly honoring Saturn, or just using the festival as a cover for his excesses? The jury's still out on that one, and it wasn't just the emperors who had a vested interest in the festival's success. The Roman elite also played their part. For them, Saturnalia was a chance to display their wealth and influence, to host extravagant feasts that would make even the Kardashians blush. It was a time to show off their generosity, or at least the appearance of it, because in Roman society, appearances mattered. The festival's lavish displays were a way to maintain social standing and keep the rumor mill churning in their favor. So, what does this all mean for our understanding of Saturnalia? It's a reminder that the festival was more than just a wild party. It was a complex tapestry of religious devotion, philosophical exploration, and political maneuvering. It was a reflection of a society grappling with its own contradictions, where the line between myth and reality was as fluid as the wine that fueled the celebrations. As we dig deeper into the historical accounts, it's clear that Saturnalia was as much about maintaining social order as it was about upending it. The role reversals and gift exchanges were a way to reinforce the existing hierarchy, even as they seemed to challenge it. It was a delicate dance, a balancing act between chaos and control, freedom and duty. And yet, despite its complexities, Saturnalia's appeal is undeniable. There's something timeless about the idea of a festival that allows people to let loose, to dream of a better world, if only for a week. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, to our ability to find joy and meaning even in the midst of life's challenges. And as we continue to explore the legacy of Saturnalia, it's a reminder that history is never just black and white. It's a vibrant tapestry of stories waiting to be unraveled. As we continue our deep dive into the Roman holiday bash that was Saturnalia, it's time to flip the calendar forward a few centuries and watch as the festival gets a makeover that would make even the most seasoned Instagram influencer blush. Welcome, my friends, to the transformation of Saturnalia into Christmas, a tale of religious evolution, cultural adaptation, and naturally, some good old-fashioned political maneuvering. So here's the scene. It's the 4th century AD, and Rome is undergoing some serious soul-searching as Christianity begins its meteoric rise. Once considered a fringe cult with a penchant for martyrdom, Christianity was now climbing the social ladder faster than a Roman politician at a toga party. And in 313 AD, Emperor Constantine decided it was time to give this burgeoning faith a little imperial backing, into the Edict of Milan, a decree that legalized Christianity and set the stage for a spiritual shake-up across the empire. But Constantine wasn't just playing the role of benevolent ruler. Oh no, he had his eyes on the prize, unity. The Roman Empire was a sprawling behemoth, teetering on the brink of chaos with a patchwork quilt of religions, languages, and cultures. By embracing Christianity, Constantine hoped to stitch his empire together with a common thread. It was a strategic move, like choosing the winning side in a gladiator match. And as the first Christian emperor, Constantine wasn't just looking for divine favor. He was also betting that a unified faith could help stabilize his empire's ever-wobbling political seesaw. Now, you might be wondering, how does one simply turn a pagan blowout like Saturnalia into a Christian celebration? The answer, my historically curious friends, lies in adaptation, a skill the Romans were masters at. Early Christians, facing the monumental task of converting the masses, realized that fighting against beloved traditions like Saturnalia would be about as successful as a chariot in a foot race. So, instead of scrapping the festival, they decided to co-opt it, adding a sprinkle of Christian symbolism to make it more palatable to the faithful. And here's where the magic happens. The date of December 25th was chosen to celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. Why December 25th, you ask? Well, it's a classic case of if you can't beat M, join M. The date was already significant in the Roman calendar, marking the dies natalis solis invicti, or the birthday of the unconquered sun, a festival dedicated to the sun god Sol. By aligning Christ's birth with this existing celebration, the early church leaders pulled off a religious rebranding campaign that would make modern marketers green with envy. The symbolic parallels were hard to miss, even for the Romans, who loved a good metaphor as much as they loved their wine. The sun returning to strength after the winter solstice was a potent image, one that mirrored the Christian belief in the light of Christ entering the world. And thus, with a clever bit of celestial sleight of hand, the festival of Saturnalia began its transformation into what we now recognize as Christmas. Saturn might have been the god of time, but it seems even he couldn't stop the march of Christian doctrine. But let's not get too carried away with this neat narrative. The transition wasn't all smooth sailing and angelic choirs. There was resistance, skepticism, and more than a few raised eyebrows among the Roman populace. After all, Saturnalia was a time-honored tradition, and many Romans were reluctant to swap their cherished festivities for something that felt, well, a bit holier than thou. Yet, with time, and a lot of ecclesiastical elbow grease, the new holiday began to take root. In the midst of this cultural fusion, certain Saturnalia traditions were given a Christian twist. Take the ever-popular gift-giving, for instance. While Saturnalia gifts were often extravagant displays of wealth and status, the Christian iteration emphasized charity and goodwill. It was a subtle shift, but one that helped align the practice with the more altruistic teachings of Christianity. And let's not forget the feasting, because who doesn't love a good feast? The lavish Saturnalia banquets evolved into Christmas dinners, where the focus remained on community and celebration, albeit with a more pious veneer. The melding of these traditions wasn't just about religious pragmatism. It was a reflection of the socio-economic realities of the time. As the Roman Empire grappled with economic instability, the adoption of Christmas provided a stabilizing force, a way to unify diverse populations under a single banner. It was a clever balancing act, an ancient version of cultural diplomacy that acknowledged the importance of tradition while paving the way for a new religious order. And what about the political motivations behind this shift? Well, savvy rulers like Constantine didn't miss a beat. By supporting the rise of Christianity, they could count on the growing Christian population to back their rule, creating a loyal base that would help maintain their grip on power. It was a win-win situation. Emperors gained a devoted following, while the church gained influence and legitimacy within the empire's political framework. Talk about a match made in heaven. But let's not gloss over the complexities here. Transition from Saturnalia to Christmas wasn't just a story of seamless integration. It was a messy, gradual process, full of compromise and negotiation. For many Romans, the new holiday was a reminder of the old ways, a nostalgic nod to their cultural heritage. And for early Christians, it was a chance to spread their message, to assert their place within a society that was both ancient and evolving. So, what does this all mean for our understanding of history? It's a reminder that cultural change is rarely a simple story of replacement. It's about adaptation, negotiation, and the blending of old and new. It's about finding common ground and building bridges between traditions, even when those bridges are a bit rickety. And as we look back on the transformation of Saturnalia into Christmas, it's clear that history is full of surprises, of unexpected twists and turns that shape the world we know today. Stay tuned as we continue our journey through this fascinating historical tapestry. We've got more ground to cover, more myths to bust, and more stories to unravel. Until then, remember that history is never just a series of dates and events. It's a living, breathing narrative, full of intrigue and complexity. And as we peel back the layers of the past, we're reminded that the present is always shaped by the echoes of history. And speaking of surprises, it's time to look at how some of those Saturnalia practices have sneakily slipped into our modern Christmas traditions like a Roman reveler crashing an elite party. Let's be real, though. The holiday season we know today is a bit like a cultural fruitcake, dense, colorful, and a bit of an acquired taste, shaped by centuries of tradition, adaptation, and more than a pinch of commercial seasoning. Take gift-giving, for instance. Sure, we might not be exchanging leopards or marble statues, but the essence of giving has survived the ages. Back in Saturnalia, gifts were a social currency, a way to flaunt status and wealth. Fast forward to today, and while the gifts might look more like the latest tech gadgets or designer bling, the underlying motive hasn't entirely changed. It's still about making an impression, although now we sometimes pretend it's all about thoughtfulness. And let's not forget the economic whirlwind this creates. Just as Roman markets soared with Saturnalia demand, modern retailers count on the holiday season to keep their balance sheets in the black. In fact, U.S. holiday retail sales in 2022 topped a whopping $936 billion. Talk about a tradition with staying power. But beyond the glitz of gift-giving lies another Saturnalia relic, the love of feasting. Ancient Romans knew how to throw a banquet that would make even Bacchus proud. And while today's Christmas dinners might not feature flamingos or ostrich eggs, the spirit of indulgence remains. According to the National Retail Federation, the average American spends over $230 on food and decorations every holiday season. So, the next time you find yourself in a turkey-induced coma, remember, you're just continuing a time-honored tradition of overindulgence. Now, let's not gloss over the romanticized notion of the holiday spirit. We love the idea of peace on earth and goodwill to all, but Saturnalia's legacy suggests that behind every merry celebration lurks a bit of chaos and obligation. The role reversals of Saturnalia, where slaves wore their masters' togas, have morphed into the more sanitized notion of equality and togetherness we cherish today. Yet the pressure to perform, to meet societal expectations, has remained just as potent. It's like the ghost of Saturnalia whispering, "Keep up with the Joneses," or in this case, the Julii. And while we're on the topic of ghosts, how about those ancient political theatrics? Roman emperors used Saturnalia to boost their image, much like modern leaders conveniently find themselves in heartwarming photo ops this time of year. Remember those images of Constantine embracing Christianity? Today's politicians might not be declaring new religions, but they certainly know the value of a strategically timed appearance at a food bank or toy drive. It's all about optics, baby. Of course, no conversation about holiday heritage would be complete without a nod to the commercialization that has become its hallmark. Just as ancient merchants capitalized on Saturnalia, today's retailers have turned the holiday season into a consumer frenzy that would make even the savviest Roman trader blush. Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and the relentless march of seasonal sales are a testament to our enduring love affair with spending. And let's not kid ourselves. Santa might be the poster boy, but the economic engine behind the sleigh is fueled by cold, hard cash. So, as we untangle the twinkling lights and sift through the tinsel, what's the takeaway from our romp through history? It's a reminder that while the details have changed, the essence of celebration, community, indulgence, and a touch of extravagance has remained remarkably consistent. Saturnalia's legacy is a testament to our unyielding desire to find joy amidst the chaos, to connect with others even as we navigate the complexities of social obligation. In the grand tapestry of history, Saturnalia and Christmas remind us that traditions are not static relics, but living, evolving narratives. They reflect who we are and who we aspire to be, full of contradictions, beauty, and yes, a bit of madness. So, the next time you find yourself caught in the holiday hustle, whether you're hunting for the perfect gift or simply surviving the family dinner, take a moment to nod to the ancient revelers who started it all. Because in the end, whether you're a Roman or a modern citizen, the heart of the celebration is about finding a moment of warmth in the cold of winter, a flicker of light in the darkest days of the year. And there you have it, a festive journey through time that leaves us pondering the echoes of our past in the present. As you sip your eggnog and admire the glow of your holiday lights, remember that you're part of a long line of celebrators, each adding their own twist to an ancient story. Here's to history, the ultimate party planner, and to us, its merry participants. Cheers to the season, and may your festivities be as vibrant and enduring as Saturnalia itself. St. Nicholas might not have been the jolly old man in a red suit dropping gifts down chimneys, but he was one fascinating fellow. Imagine a 4th-century bishop wandering the sun-soaked shores of Myra, now in modern-day Turkey, not with sleigh bells, but with a reputation for being the ancient world's go-to-guy for secret gift-giving. You see, Nicholas was as much a real person as your grumpy neighbor, albeit with a tad more generosity and a lot less grump. Born around 270 AD in the Greek-speaking world of the Roman Empire, Nicholas was the original altruist in a toga. He inherited a hefty sum of money from his parents, who shuffled off this mortal coil early. Instead of splurging on a marble villa or a chariot with extra horsepower, Nicholas chose to spend his wealth on the needy. One of his first legendary acts of kindness was slipping gold coins through the window of a destitute family's house to provide dowries for 3 daughters. No dowry, no marriage prospects, and back then, being single could doom a woman to a life of poverty or worse. Talk about a real-life rescue mission, sans the capes and tights. Now, let's pause and appreciate the economic realities of Nicholas's time. The Roman Empire was no utopia. We're talking high taxes, rampant inflation, and a social safety net as thin as a toga in a rainstorm. Gold coins weren't exactly lying around like confetti. They were lifelines. Nicholas's generosity wasn't just feel-good charity. It was a radical act of social welfare in a harsh economic climate. His actions spoke louder than words, echoing through the centuries to form the basis of the Santa Claus legend. But how does a humble bishop from Myra morph into the globe-trotting, red-suited Santa Claus we know today? The transformation is a tale as twisted as a Christmas candy cane. After his death on December 6, 343 AD, Nicholas's reputation for miraculous deeds spread faster than a viral TikTok. He was soon venerated as a saint, his feast day celebrated annually. The real kicker, his bones became hot property. Yep, relics were the rock stars of the medieval world, and St. Nick's were the Beatles of bone fragments. In the 11th century, a group of enterprising sailors from Bari, Italy, concocted a relic heist worthy of an Ocean's 11 script. They swiped Nicholas's bones from his tomb in Myra and brought them to Bari, where they built a basilica in his honor. Why? Because possessing the relics of a saint was like having a celestial VIP pass. Pilgrims flocked to Bari, boosting the local economy. It was the medieval equivalent of a tourist trap, complete with holy knickknacks. This relic stealing wasn't just about spiritual prestige. It was about economic gain in a period where religion and commerce were intertwined like mistletoe and kisses. The presence of relics meant pilgrim traffic, and more visitors translated to bustling markets, full inns, and clinking coins. The bones of St. Nicholas were essentially the medieval version of a blockbuster attraction, drawing crowds and cash to the lucky town that housed them. As the centuries rolled on, Nicholas's legend only grew. Tales of his miraculous deeds multiplied like rabbits in spring. He saved sailors from storms, resurrected murdered children, and even punched a heretic in the face at the Council of Nicaea. Yes, our gentle gift-giver had a feisty side. This mix of piety and punchiness made Nicholas a versatile saint, appealing to everyone from seafarers to schoolchildren. By the Middle Ages, St. Nicholas had become the poster boy for gift-giving. His feast day, December 6, was a time for generosity, with people leaving gifts for children and the poor. Fast forward a few centuries, and his story crosses the English Channel to the Netherlands, where he becomes Sinterklaas, a bearded old man who arrives on a steamboat from Spain to deliver presents. Sounds familiar, right? So there you have it, the real story of St. Nicholas, man whose legendary acts of charity and the quirky journey of his relics helped spin the yarn of Santa Claus. From a bishop in a toga to the jolly old elf with a sleigh, it's a tale of history, myth, and just a dash of scandal. Whether you see him as a saint, a legend, or a festive icon, there's no denying that Nicholas's spirit of giving has left an indelible mark on the world. And with that, there's no better way to nod off than with the thought that sometimes, just sometimes, the nice guy doesn't finish last. But let's not get too cozy with the idea of St. Nicholas as just a buoyant bringer of gifts. Fast forward to medieval Europe, where Nicholas's story gets an unexpected makeover, like a historical episode of Extreme Makeover, Patron Saint Edition. You see, in the bustling markets and candle-lit cathedrals of the Middle Ages, Nicholas wasn't just the go-to saint for children dreaming of sugar plums. No, he was the ultimate multitasker of sainthood, the celestial CEO covering all bases. Need protection from drowning? Call Saint Nick. Got grain to sell? Nicholas. Need a patron for pawnbrokers? You guessed it, Nicholas again. He was the Swiss Army knife of saints, which tells us something about both his adaptability and the medieval appetite for a one-stop divine sharp. The political and social factors that elevated Nicholas to such dizzying heights are as complex as medieval plumbing, or lack thereof. Europe during this period was a patchwork of kingdoms, duchies, and the occasional rogue principality. It was a land where the divine right of kings wasn't just a slogan, but a guiding principle. Religion was the glue that held this feudal jigsaw puzzle together. In a world where life could be nastier, more brutish, and shorter than a medieval hairstyle, people clung to their faith like a knight to his trusty steed. And what better figure to embody hope and charity than a saint known for both? Nicholas's reputation spread like a medieval meme, transcending borders and languages with the universal appeal of a Hallmark card. But don't be fooled into thinking this was all about spiritual enlightenment. Nope, there was some good old-fashioned medieval marketing at work here, too. Towns vied for the prestige of claiming Nicholas as their patron, which was akin to having a top-tier celebrity endorsement today. Imagine Canai tweeting about your local bakery. That's the kind of clout we're talking about. Market towns would host fairs and festivals in his honor, drawing crowds from miles around. The economic boost was about as subtle as a knight in armor clanking down a cobblestone street. From Aachen to Zurich, Nicholas was the patron saint of prosperity, and towns weren't shy about cashing in on his brand. Now, here's where things get a bit twisty. Enter the Protestant Reformation, a period that made Game of Thrones look like a family picnic. As Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the church door in 1517, Europe was rocked by a seismic shift. The Reformation was like a divine earthquake, shaking the foundations of religious life, and sending ripples through every village and hamlet. Saints were suddenly out of fashion, viewed as remnants of a corrupt church system. But old habits die hard, and Nicholas, with his deep-rooted popularity, was a tough icon to toss aside. Despite the Protestant disdain for saintly intercession, Nicholas managed to slip through the cracks, much like those gold coins he once slipped through windows. In the Netherlands, where Sinterklaas continued his rounds, the tradition evolved rather than disappeared. Protestant communities found a loophole by focusing on the spirit of giving rather than saintly veneration. It was a bit like rebranding a defunct product line. Nicholas was no longer a saint in the Catholic sense, but an emblem of generosity that transcended religious divides. This was the Santa Claus we know today, slowly emerging from the religious and political turmoil of the Reformation, adaptable as ever. And speaking of transformations, let's tiptoe into the world of Christmas markets, a phenomenon that owes more to Nicholas than you might think. Picture this. It's a chilly December evening in medieval Germany, the air crisp as a freshly minted coin. Wooden stalls line the town square, twinkling with lanterns and brimming with hand-carved toys, spices, and steaming mugs of mulled wine. These markets were not just seasonal shopping sprees. They were a vital part of medieval life. They were social hubs, economic engines, and spiritual gatherings all rolled into one. The rise of Christmas markets is a fascinating chapter in the Nicholas saga, revealing how commerce and tradition intertwined like ivy on a church wall. These markets often coincided with St. Nicholas's feast day, December 6, serving as a kickoff to the holiday season. Traders and craftsmen would flock to these events, hawking their wares to eager townsfolk. It was a win-win scenario. Towns gained economic momentum, and Nicholas's legend as a gift-giver was cemented into the cultural consciousness. So, while St. Nicholas might not have personally donned a red suit or trained reindeer, his influence on the Yuletide festivities we cherish today is undeniable. Through a melange of medieval marketing savvy, religious adaptability, and economic necessity, the legend of Nicholas became a tapestry woven with threads of piety, commerce, and community spirit. And as we stand in the present, sipping our eggnog and exchanging presents, we nod to the past, where a humble bishop from Myra became an emblem of generosity, a beacon of hope, and yes, a patron saint of just about everything. But don't hang your stockings just yet. There's more to the story. The tale of Nicholas's transformation into the jolly old man we know today involves more culture clashes, more economic upheavals, and a few artistic liberties taken by poets and illustrators. Stay tuned as we unwrap the next chapter of this remarkable journey, a journey that continues to captivate our imaginations and fill our homes with the spirit of giving. As we tiptoe into the 19th century, brace yourself for a cultural transformation more dramatic than a Victorian melodrama. Here, the metamorphosis of St. Nicholas from a revered saint to the modern Santa Claus picks up pace, courtesy of a few imaginative American writers and illustrators who decided St. Nick could use a bit of a makeover and a new address. Enter the Industrial Revolution, a time when everyone was too busy inventing machines and cranking out factory goods to worry much about what a saint should look like. But in this era of steam engines and smokestacks, Christmas underwent a makeover that would have made even the most seasoned influencer envious. The holiday was ripe for commercial plucking, and the figure of Santa Claus was ready to be reshaped, mass-produced, and marketed like the latest iPhone. Let's begin with a name drop that'll make any literary buff swoon: Washington Irving. Known for penning the legend of Sleepy Hollow, Irving was also a key player in popularizing the American version of Saint Nick. In his 1809 satirical work, A History of New York, he introduced a pipe-smoking, flying wagon-riding Dutchman named St. Nicholas. Irving's Santa was less about religious reverence and more about festive fun, setting the stage for a new kind of holiday icon. Imagine the audacity, taking a solemn saint and giving him a flying wagon, a precursor to the sleigh, minus the reindeer. Fast forward a couple decades to 1823, when the poem A Visit from St. Nicholas, better known today as The Night Before Christmas, made its appearance. Attributed to Clement Clark Moore, this poem was like the Pixar film of its time, hugely popular, endlessly quoted, and packed with visuals that stuck in the public imagination. Moore's St. Nick was a jolly old elf with a sleigh, reindeer, and a penchant for chimney-based home invasions. Here was Santa, not as a distant saintly figure, but as a cozy, approachable character who could slide down your chimney and leave gifts, or coal, if you were on the naughty list. It was a stroke of poetic genius, intertwining the whimsical with the commercial. Now, let's sprinkle in a little economic context, because, as always, money talks. The Industrial Revolution had transformed America into a consumer society. Factories churned out goods faster than you could say, assembly line, and people had money to spend. Christmas became not just a time for piety, but for presents, as the middle class embraced gift-giving with glee. Retailers seized this opportunity, transforming Christmas into a commercial bonanza. Santa Claus, as envisioned by Moore, fit perfectly into this new paradigm. He was a gift-giver extraordinaire, the ultimate holiday pitchman. But wait, there's more. The visual image of Santa Claus we recognize today owes a debt to a German-American cartoonist, Thomas Nast. In the 1860, Nast's illustrations in Harper's Weekly cemented Santa's look as a rotund, bearded man with a red suit trimmed with white fur. Nast also gave Santa his official North Pole residency, a clever geopolitical move that put Santa out of reach of any national jurisdiction. A citizen of the world, if you will. The North Pole. A stroke of genius, ensuring that Santa remained a neutral, universally beloved figure, free from the messiness of real-world borders. The transformation of Santa Claus was more than just a cosmetic overhaul. It was a reflection of changing social and economic realities. In a nation grappling with the aftermath of the Civil War and the rise of urbanization, Santa became a symbol of comfort and continuity. He was an anchor in the storm, a reminder of simpler times in an increasingly complex world. The image of the jolly man in red, with his sleigh and reindeer, was a balm for a society in the throes of rapid change. And speaking of change, let's not overlook the role of marketing. By the late 19th century, Santa was being used in advertisements to sell everything from toys to tobacco. Yes, tobacco. Nothing says holiday cheer quite like a pipe-smoking Santa hawking cigars. Department stores eagerly adopted Santa as their seasonal mascot, setting up elaborate Christmas displays and hiring actors to play Santa, creating a beloved tradition that continues today. This was the era of the department store Santa, a character both magical and marketable. But let's not sugarcoat it entirely. While the commercialization of Santa Claus brought joy and economic prosperity, it also highlighted the growing divide between the haves and the have-nots. The holiday season became a time of stark contrasts, where lavish displays of wealth stood in contrast to those who struggled to make ends meet. The figure of Santa Claus, with his boundless generosity, became a symbol not just of joy and giving, but also a reminder of the inequalities that persisted even amidst the holiday cheer. As we weave through this tapestry of history, it's clear that Santa Claus is a product of both myth and marketing, a character as complex as the society that created him. From the humble Bishop of Myra to a jolly old elf with a penchant for chimney antics, the evolution of Santa Claus reflects the shifting tides of culture, commerce, and community. But hold your reindeer, because this tale isn't over yet. There's more to uncover as we delve deeper into the 20th century, where Santa's story takes yet another fascinating turn. Stay tuned, because the best is yet to come. As we step into the 20th century, Santa Claus doesn't just rest on his laurels, or his sleigh, for that matter. Oh no, the jolly man in red embarks on a whirlwind global tour that would make a rock star blush. We're talking international icon status, folks, and not just because he's got the best frequent flyer program known to man or reindeer. This transformation into a worldwide phenomenon is fueled by a potent mix of marketing, media, and a sprinkle of transnational myth magic. Let's kick things off with a fizzy splash of red and white. Coca-Cola, of course. The year is 1931, and the beverage company is looking to boost sales during the winter months. Enter Haddon Sundblom, an illustrator with a knack for creating images that stick in your brain like a catchy pop song. Sundblom's Santa was a plump, rosy-cheeked fellow who looked like he'd just stepped out of a Norman Rockwell painting. Clad in Coca-Cola's signature red and white, this Santa became the face of Christmas advertising, transforming a humble soft drink into the unofficial beverage of the holiday season. Thanks to Coke, Santa's color scheme was now as much a part of the Christmas canon as tinsel and awkward family gatherings. But let's not give all the credit to a sugary drink. Hollywood was already setting the stage for Santa's global domination. Remember the 1947 classic, Miracle on 34th Street? This film wasn't just feel-good fodder for the masses. It was a cinematic symbol of Santa's integration into American culture. Released by 20th Century Fox, and starring an affable, grandfatherly Santa played by Edmund Gwenn, the movie captured the hearts of millions. It also snagged 3 Academy Awards. Now, if that doesn't scream cultural icon, I don't know what does. The film cleverly blended skepticism and belief, mirroring the real-world tension between commercialism and the spirit of giving. Kris Kringle, the movie's Santa, was the ultimate mythbuster, proving that even in a world of cynics, the magic of Santa could prevail. Yet, beneath the twinkling lights and celluloid smiles lay a more complex reality. As Santa's image spread beyond the borders of the United States, he had to adapt to different cultures, like a chameleon with a beard. In the UK, Father Christmas maintained a distinct persona, rooted in older British traditions and slightly less commercialized than his American counterpart. Meanwhile, in countries like Japan, Santa was introduced post-World War Roman II, becoming a symbol of Western influence and modernization. Here, he traded his sleigh for a bit of sushi and a rising sun backdrop, showing that even a centuries-old legend could learn a few new tricks. Santa's global journey wasn't without its misadventures, though. Take the time in 1951 when a French clergyman, tired of the commercialization of Christmas, staged a public trial for Santa Claus. In a bizarre twist of fate that could only happen in France, the jolly man was found guilty of paganism and burned in effigy outside Dijon Cathedral. This act was meant to protest the creeping consumerism overshadowing the holiday's religious significance. Talk about a tough crowd. Luckily, Santa's image proved as resilient as his mythos, bouncing back with the ease of a rubber ball. But why did Santa become such a global sensation? Well, the answer lies in a mix of nostalgia, consumerism, and the universal appeal of a good story. In a rapidly globalizing world, Santa Claus offered a shared narrative, a bit of common ground in a landscape of cultural diversity. His image was malleable, able to fit into various traditions while maintaining his core appeal as the ultimate gift giver. The economic impact of Santa's global reach can't be overstated either. In the United States alone, the Christmas season accounts for nearly 20% of all retail sales, with billions spent on everything from toys to tech gadgets, all under the jolly man's watchful eye. Across the globe, countries have adapted this consumer model, making Christmas a key driver of economic activity, even in places where the holiday isn't traditionally celebrated. In the face of this commercial juggernaut, it's easy to overlook the spirit of generosity that Saint Nicholas originally embodied. But perhaps that's part of Santa's magic, his ability to straddle the line between myth and marketing, to exist both as a symbol of commercialism and a beacon of holiday cheer. He's the perfect blend of nostalgia and novelty, a timeless figure who evolves with the times while maintaining a twinkle in his eye. As the 20th century unfolded, Santa continued to weave himself into the fabric of global culture, appearing in everything from Bollywood films to Brazilian TV specials. His image was as ubiquitous as ever, a testament to the power of storytelling and the universal desire for a bit of magic in our lives. And though he traded his humble beginnings for a globe-trotting lifestyle sponsored by Coke and Kodak, the essence of Santa remained unchanged, a symbol of joy, hope, and a reminder that the spirit of giving transcends borders, languages, and even the occasional effigy burning. So as we stand at the threshold of the 21st century, we see Santa poised to continue his reign as the ultimate holiday ambassador. His story isn't just about gifts and gaudy decorations. It's a narrative about connection, about the ties that bind us across time and space. But hold your ho-ho-hos, because there's still more to unwrap in this tale. As we dive into the modern era, we'll explore how Santa navigates the digital age, tackles new challenges, and remains as relevant as ever in a rapidly changing world. Stay tuned, because Santa's sleigh is still on the move. As Santa Claus barrels into the 21st century, he's not just riding on the coattails of nostalgia. He's navigating the digital age like a pro, albeit with a few more technical glitches than he had with chimneys. In a world where kids have smartphones by the age of 5 and drones are delivering packages faster than you can say Dasher and Dancer. Santa has found new ways to remain relevant. Let's dive into the tech-savvy Santa of today. Forget about handwritten letters sent via snail mail to the North Pole. Modern kids are shooting off emails to Santa's virtual mailbox faster than you can sing Jingle Bells. And these aren't your average wish lists. Some kids are attaching spreadsheets, complete with itemized lists and links to preferred online retailers. Talk about next-gen gift giving. This digital shift isn't just a whimsical update. It reflects a broader trend in how technology is reshaping traditions. The online Christmas market is booming, with holiday e-retail sales in the US alone surpassing $150 billion in recent years. Santa's transition to digital isn't just about convenience. It's a savvy adaptation to an economy that's as fast-paced as Rudolph on Christmas Eve. But Santa's digital makeover isn't just about emails and e-commerce. Enter the world of social media, where Santa's presence is as ubiquitous as cat memes and viral dance challenges. You might spot him on TikTok, jiving to the latest holiday hits, or on Instagram, sharing selfies from his workshop. He's even been known to engage in the occasional Twitter war with skeptics. This online presence keeps him in the public eye, reinforcing his role as a staple of modern culture. But it also highlights a deeper trend, the commodification of attention. In a world where clicks and likes translate to currency, Santa has become yet another brand vying for our ever-diminishing attention spans. Now, let's not forget the economic engine that fuels this modern-day Santa machine. Christmas remains a juggernaut in the retail sector, with the National Retail Federation reporting that holiday sales in the U.S. account for nearly 19% of total annual retail revenue. That's a sleigh load of shopping. The holiday season is a critical period for retailers, small businesses, and the economy at large. Santa, in his digital and traditional forms, is at the heart of this economic whirlwind, a reminder of the commercial stakes tied to holiday cheer. But with all this focus on dollars and downloads, where does the magic fit in? Santa's enduring appeal lies in his ability to straddle the line between commerce and wonder. While his image is plastered across ads and websites, the essence of Santa, generosity, joy, and a sprinkle of magic, remains intact. It's a balancing act worthy of a high-wire performer at a Christmas circus, and it's one that continues to resonate across generations. Speaking of magic, let's talk about the myth-busting side of Santa. Despite his jolly image, the reality of his narrative is far from straightforward. From his origins as a 4th-century bishop in Myra to his transformation into a global icon, the story of Santa Claus is a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability. It's a tale that has been shaped by cultural, economic, and technological forces over centuries. And while the romanticized version of Santa as a benevolent gift-giver endures, his history is a mosaic of myth and marketing, a reflection of the societies that have embraced him. Now, you might wonder, does it really matter where Santa came from or how he evolved? In a world obsessed with holiday sales and seasonal marketing blitzes, does the origin of Santa's story still hold significance? The answer lies in the power of stories to connect us. Santa's tale, with all its twists and turns, is a reminder of the enduring human desire for generosity and joy, qualities that transcend the commercial trappings of the season. It's a narrative stitched together by different cultures, economies, and eras, each adding their own embellishments to the tapestry. In a way, Santa is a mirror reflecting the complexities of our world. He embodies the tension between tradition and modernity, between the sacred and the commercial. He's both a relic of the past and a symbol of the future, adaptable and timeless. His journey from the shores of Myra to the bustling digital age is a testament to the power of myth to evolve while keeping its core message intact. As we wrap up this historical sleigh ride, consider the legacy of Santa Claus. He's more than just a character in a red suit. He's a cultural phenomenon, a testament to the power of myth and marketing to shape our world. So, as you sip your eggnog and exchange gifts this holiday season, take a moment to appreciate the journey of Santa Claus, an enduring icon of generosity and joy, a beacon of holiday spirit navigating the complexities of modern life. And remember, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the magic of Santa lies not just in the gifts he brings, but in the stories that continue to enchant and unite us all. The sun-drenched hills of ancient Greece weren't just about olive groves and philosophy. Though, let's face it, Socrates did make casual chats into an Olympic-level sport. But rewind a couple of thousand years, and you'd find the Greeks creating a whole new kind of cultural spectacle, theatre. And it all began with, wait for it, religious festivals. Yes, that's right. What we now consider highbrow entertainment started as a raucous party for Dionysus, the god of wine, fertility, and basically anything involving a good time. Dionysus was the kind of deity who knew how to throw a party, and the Greeks were more than happy to oblige him. These early gatherings were known as the Dionysia, a festival to end all festivals, complete with wine, song, dance, and eventually drama. Imagine ancient Athens around the 6th century BCE, buzzing with anticipation. People poured into the city, ready to celebrate and, more importantly, compete for theatrical glory. Because let's be real, what's a festival without a bit of friendly competition? It wasn't just about who could throw back the most wine or dance the longest, although those were undoubtedly crowd pleasers. No, this was about storytelling, and for the Greeks, storytelling was practically a national sport. The idea was to perform plays that honored Dionysus, and it quickly became the ancient world's equivalent of the Oscars, except instead of golden statues, the winners got bragging rights and maybe a laurel wreath. The performances were held in open-air amphitheaters, the architectural marvels of their time. These weren't just any old venues. These were grand, sweeping structures carved into hillsides, designed to project a whisper into the back row without a single microphone in sight. The theatre of Dionysus in Athens, for example, could seat up to 17,000 people. That's more than some modern sports stadiums, folks. Imagine the ancient equivalent of trying to get front-row tickets to a sold-out concert, except everyone was there to see actors in masks recite tragedies and comedies. Let's talk logistics, because putting on a Greek theatre performance was no small feat. First, there was the issue of masks. Actors, all male by the way, wore large masks to depict different characters. These masks were exaggerated, with wide mouths to project sound, a clever workaround for the lack of modern acoustics. Then there was the chorus, a group of actors who sang, danced, and narrated the story. They were like the ancient Greek version of your high school theatre troupe, only with a better sense of rhythm and fewer awkward teenage crushes. Now, you might be picturing these amphitheaters as serene, civilized places where audiences politely clapped after each performance. Well, guess again. The crowd was as much a part of the show as the actors themselves. Think of them as the original hecklers, ready to shout their opinions at any moment. But this wasn't just a free-for-all. It was a democratic experience. The audience was a microcosm of Athenian society, with citizens from all walks of life sharing their thoughts on the performances. It was like a town hall meeting, if town hall meetings included a lot more togas and slightly fewer PowerPoint presentations. And let's not forget the hype. The anticipation for these performances was the ancient equivalent of lining up for the latest Blockbuster. People traveled from far and wide, packing amphitheaters to the brim. There were no trailers or sneak peeks, just the promise of a good story and perhaps a chance to throw shade at a rival playwright. In this theatrical world, political and social issues were laid bare. The plays often tackled the big questions of the day, from justice and power to morality and fate. These weren't just stories. They were reflections of the society that created them, a mirror held up to the world. The playwrights, names like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, weren't just entertainers. They were commentators, using the stage to provoke thought and sometimes controversy. So, what was a Greek theatre performance really like? It was part religious rite, part competitive sport, and part social commentary, a blend of high culture and popular entertainment. The Greeks may have been the first to put on a play, but they certainly weren't the last to understand that sometimes you just need a little drama to make sense of the world. And if Dionysus was pleased, well, that was just the icing on the cake. So, the ancient Greek theatre wasn't just a cultural jamboree or Dionysian bash. It was a serious business, baby. Let's take a peek behind the curtain and see how these spectacles were funded and what kind of economic wizardry kept the drama rolling. Spoiler alert. It wasn't all olive oil and philosophical debates. First off, let's talk money, honey. The Greeks didn't just wake up one day and have a fully funded theatre festival. Nope, it required some serious drachmas. Enter the Korgos, a wealthy Athenian citizen who footed the bill for the production. You might think of them as the ancient equivalent of a Broadway producer, minus the jazz hands and glitter. Instead of funding the next big musical, these guys were tasked with financing the chorus's costumes, masks, and training, plus the musicians and stager hands. It was a hefty financial commitment, and it was all on the Chorgos' dime. Why, you ask? Because it was an honor, a civic duty, and a chance to flex one's financial muscles in front of the whole city. Plus, for your production one, you got a statue erected in your honor. Talk about a return on investment. The Chorgos wasn't just a silent partner, though. They had a say in the artistic direction, and their reputation was on the line. Imagine the pressure of not only bankrolling a major event, but also ensuring it was the talk of the town for all the right reasons. It was like being a modern-day Instagram influencer, but with a lot more at stake than a few likes and comments. Now, let's chat about the cost of admission, because this wasn't exactly a free-for-all. Attending these performances wasn't cheap. Tickets were about 2 arballs, roughly half a day's wage for the average worker. That's like spending your entire lunch money to watch a play. But here's the kicker. The Athenian government sometimes subsidized tickets for those who couldn't afford them, thanks to a fund known as the Theoric Fund. It was the ancient Greek version of a government grant for culture lovers, ensuring that even the less affluent could partake in the theatrical revelry. A nice gesture, but let's not forget it also served a political purpose. Keeping the masses entertained and engaged was a clever way to maintain social order and prevent unrest. Bread and circuses, folks, bread and circuses. The playwrights, those literary architects of ancient drama, were the rock stars of their day. Names like Sophocles and Euripides were as recognizable as Shakespeare or Spielberg today. But unlike modern-day screenwriters, these guys weren't exactly rolling in wealth. The honor and fame were their primary rewards, along with the occasional prize. Winning a festival was akin to snagging a Pulitzer or an Oscar, but without the lucrative back-end deals. Their plays were often politically charged or morally probing, serving as a platform to comment on contemporary issues. These weren't just stories. They were critiques, challenges to the status quo wrapped in tragedy and comedy. Actors, on the other hand, were a different breed altogether. All male, they donned masks and costumes to play multiple roles, including female characters. These were the unsung heroes of the Greek stage. While some achieved fame and even a certain level of celebrity status, they weren't exactly living in luxury. Many were slaves or foreigners, which meant they were often seen as outsiders in Athenian society, despite their crucial role in bringing these stories to life. Talk about a paradox, celebrated on stage but sidelined in society. Let's not romanticize it too much, though. The theater wasn't just a place of enlightenment and cultural exchange. It was also a political arena. The plays often mirrored the political climate, subtly, or sometimes not so subtly, commenting on leadership, war, and justice. The audience, a microcosm of Athens itself, was as politically charged as the plays they watched. These performances were more than just entertainment. They were a form of social dialogue, a way for the populace to engage with and reflect on the issues of their time. It was art with a purpose, long before that became a cliché. So, while it's easy to get swept up in the romance of ancient Greek theater as a beacon of cultural enlightenment, let's not forget the gritty reality. It was a complex ecosystem, fueled by financial investments, political motivations, and social dynamics. It was about prestige, power, and influence, as much as it was about art and expression. The theater was a reflection of the society that supported it, with all its beauty and blemishes. And yet, despite the economic and political underpinnings, the allure of the theater was undeniable. It captivated audiences, challenged norms, and left a legacy that echoes through the ages. It wasn't just a show. It was an event, a spectacle, a moment in time that brought together the high and low of society in a shared human experience. Dionysus would have been proud. Stay tuned, because the drama only gets richer from here. Speaking of drama, let's dive into the rock stars of the ancient Greek stage. Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. These playwrights were the original content creators, churning out tragedies that left audiences in a state of existential pondering and sometimes just downright bewilderment. These guys were like the Scorseses of their time, but instead of CGI and special effects, they had masks, choruses, and a lot of imagination. First up, Aeschylus, often hailed as the father of tragedy. This guy practically wrote the book on it, literally. Aeschylus was born around 525 BCE, and he took the nascent art form of Greek drama and gave it a narrative punch. Before him, performances were mostly choral songs and dances, but Aeschylus introduced the second actor to the stage, creating the potential for conflict and dialogue. If Aeschylus had a LinkedIn, it would be filled with achievements like that. His most famous work, The Austere, is a trilogy that explores themes of justice, revenge, and the divine order. Heavy stuff, right? But what made Aeschylus a legend wasn't just his storytelling. It was how he used drama to reflect societal norms and challenge them. He had a knack for weaving the political and the personal, showing the Athenians that their struggles weren't just theirs alone. They were part of a larger cosmic order. In The Austere, the transition from personal vendetta to a system of civic justice mirrored Athens' own shift towards democracy. Talk about art imitating life. Next, enter Sophocles, born around 496 BCE, who took Aeschylus's innovations and ran with them, like an overachieving marathoner. Sophocles introduced a third actor, which might not sound like much, but it was a game changer. More actors meant more complex stories and character dynamics. Sophocles was like the Tarantino of ancient Greece, known for his intricate plots and deep character development. His masterpiece, Oedipus Rex, is the quintessential Greek tragedy. It's got everything: fate, prophecy, and a king who just can't catch a break. Sophocles explored themes of fate versus free will, questioning whether humans really had control over their destinies or were merely puppets of the gods. It's the kind of existential crisis that makes you question your life choices over your morning coffee. The play was a hit in its time, and its themes still resonate today. Freud even named a complex after it, so you know it's got some serious staying power. Sophocles was also quite the golden boy in Athens, serving as a general, priest, and even a city treasurer at one point. This wasn't just a playwright. This was a man of the world, deeply embedded in the political and social fabric of Athens. He understood the pulse of the people and tapped into it with his plays, which is probably why they were such a smash. And then there was Euripides, the bad boy of the trio, born around 480 BCE. If Aeschylus and Sophocles were the established auteurs, Euripides was the indie filmmaker with a penchant for pushing boundaries. He was the provocateur, the one who didn't mind ruffling some feathers. Euripides introduced more realistic characters and complex women who defied the traditional roles assigned to them. In Medea, he gave audiences a heroine who was both victim and villain, a woman wronged who takes revenge in the most horrific way possible. This wasn't your typical damsel in distress. This was a character with agency, and she was terrifyingly human. Euripides had a way of holding up a mirror to society, exposing its flaws and hypocrisies. Not surprisingly, this didn't always endear him to his contemporaries. He often found himself on the receiving end of criticism, but that didn't stop him from experimenting with form and content. While he didn't win as many awards as Sophocles, his influence on later generations was profound. He was the kind of guy who might not have been appreciated in his own time, but history gave him his due. These playwrights were more than just storytellers. They were philosophers, historians, and social critics rolled into one. They didn't just reflect their world, they questioned it, challenged it, and in some ways, changed it. Their plays were a form of public discourse, a way for Athens to collectively grapple with its identity and morality. It's like if every episode of Game of Thrones came with a side of moral debate and a sprinkle of civic duty. But let's not get too romantic about it. While these playwrights were changing the game, they were also very much products of their time. Their works were steeped in the values and prejudices of ancient Greek society. Women were often portrayed through a male lens, and the tragedies were primarily about noble families and mythical figures, not the average Joe in the agora. It's a reminder that even the most revolutionary art is still bound by the limits of its creators. As for their impact, the legacy of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides can't be overstated. They laid the groundwork for drama as we know it, influencing everyone from Shakespeare to modern-day playwrights. Their exploration of human nature, fate, and morality continues to resonate, proving that the questions they grappled with are as relevant today as they were over 2 millennia ago. And that, my friends, is the mark of true genius. So, when we think about these ancient playwrights, it's easy to put them on a pedestal, to imagine them as larger-than-life figures whose works were universally celebrated. But the reality is they were just as human as the rest of us, navigating the complexities of their world and using their art to make sense of it all. They weren't just writing plays. They were crafting a legacy that would endure long after the applause faded. And if that's not a testament to the power of storytelling, I don't know what is. Stick around, because there's more to uncover about how these ancient dramas impacted audiences and shaped a cultural legacy that still echoes in theaters today. Now, while those ancient playwrights were busy crafting legacies that would echo through millennia, let's switch gears and dive into the vibrant chaos of attending a Greek play. Picture this not as a serene cultural outing, but more like heading to Coachella. If Coachella had a toga dress code, and the headliner was a dude in a mask reciting lines about fate and revenge. First things first, getting to the theater was a pilgrimage of sorts. The theater of Dionysus, nestled on the southern slope of the Acropolis, was the epicenter of Athenian drama. We're talking a trek that could rival a modern-day commute, minus the podcasts to keep you entertained. You'd be rubbing shoulders with Athenians from all walks of life, each clutching their precious 2-arbal ticket, a small fortune for some, a mere trifle for others. It was like the Super Bowl of its time, with everyone from the elite to the hoi polloi vying for a seat. As you approached the theater, the air buzzed with a sensory overload. The smell, a heady mix of olive oil, lingering incense from nearby temples, and the unmistakable aroma of thousands of people gathered in one place. There were vendors hawking snacks, think figs and nuts instead of popcorn and nachos. The theater was a place to see and be seen, a social hub where business deals were whispered and gossip spread faster than wildfire. Once inside, you'd find yourself in a massive stone amphitheater, with the sunlight bouncing off the limestone seats. It was a setup designed to make even the most mundane town crier sound like Pavarotti. The acoustics were nothing short of miraculous, an ancient auditory marvel that let a whisper travel to the very back rows. And with a seating capacity of up to 17,000, that's a lot of ears to reach. But before the show kicked off, there was the matter of seating. No reserved sections here. It was first come, first served, a democratic free-for-all that saw the elite jostling with the commoners for the best spots. The front rows were typically reserved for the priests and dignitaries, which is just as well, considering they were the ones most likely to throw a fit if they couldn't make out the divine messages woven into the drama. The performances themselves were a feast for the senses, a blend of music, dance, and storytelling that could make even the most stoic philosopher crack a smile or a tear. The actors, those masked heroes of the stage, delivered lines with a gravitas that made you wonder if the gods themselves were speaking through them. The chorus, meanwhile, was the ancient Greek version of a Greek chorus, literally. They sang, danced, and narrated with a precision that was part theater and part athletic event. But let's not pretend it was all smooth sailing. The weather could turn a perfect day sour in the blink of an eye. Rain was a nemesis, transforming the stone seats into slippery hazards, while the sun could turn the amphitheater into a giant baking dish. Umbrellas weren't exactly a thing, so you either roasted or got soaked, all in the name of culture and civic duty. Interruptions were part of the experience, too. Maybe a goat broke loose from the nearby agora, causing a commotion, or a heckler decided Euripides wasn't quite hitting the right notes. The audience, bless their democratic hearts, were not shy about voicing their opinions. A poorly received performance might be met with jeers, while a particularly moving monologue could earn thunderous applause. It was a live-action comment section, raw and unfiltered. And then there were the unexpected moments that no playwright could script. Perhaps the sun hit just right, sparking a divine revelation, or maybe it was just heatstroke. Either way, these were the stories people took back home, the tales that kept the spirit of the theater alive long after the actors took their final bows. Remember, this wasn't just entertainment. These plays were the news, the moral compass, and sometimes even the therapy session for the city. They brought to life the issues of the day, war, politics, the whims of the gods, casting them in a light that was both enlightening and entertaining. It was a place where art met life, and if reality wasn't quite as dramatic as the stage, well, at least you got a day out of it. So, while we might romanticize these theater experiences as the pinnacle of cultural enlightenment, let's not forget the gritty reality. It was sweaty, noisy, and occasionally chaotic. a true reflection of life itself. But despite the discomforts and distractions, or perhaps because of them, these performances captivated audiences, proving that the human need for storytelling transcends time and circumstance. And isn't that the real magic of theatre? Stay tuned, because the next act is about to unfold, and it promises all the drama you can handle. Now, let's pivot from the ancient dust of the Greek amphitheatres to the shiny lights of Broadway and Hollywood. Greek theatre might seem like ancient history, literally, but its fingerprints are all over our modern culture. We're talking about the DNA of drama, the blueprint for storytelling that has seeped into everything from our favorite binge-worthy series to political debates. So why does this matter? Well, buckle up, because we're about to take a high-speed chase through cultural time. First off, let's talk storytelling. Greek theatre laid the groundwork for narrative structures that are still in play today. Ever heard of the three-act structure? That's right. You can thank the ancient Greeks for that. Aeschylus and his buddies weren't just trying to fill time between courses at the symposium. They were pioneering the art of building tension, creating conflict, and delivering a cathartic resolution. This structure is the bread and butter of screenwriters, novelists, and even stand-up comedians. It's the formula that keeps us glued to our seats, popcorn in hand, waiting for that climactic twist. And let's not ignore the character archetypes. The Greeks loved a good hero's journey, and so do we. Whether it's Odysseus trying to get home or Harry Potter facing his destiny, the themes of struggle, growth, and redemption are universal. We love to see the underdog rise, the flawed hero grapple with inner demons, and the tragic figure meet their fate. It's storytelling 101, and it's as addictive as ever. Now, onto stagecraft. The Greeks knew a thing or two about spectacle. Those masks and choruses, they were the special effects of the ancient world. Fast forward to today, and you can see their influence in everything from the grandiose, set designs of Broadway to the bombastic blockbusters of Hollywood. The idea of immersing the audience in a world of fantasy and reality is a Greek legacy, whether it's through the magic of CGI or the ingenuity of a theatre set designer. The chorus, that nifty Greek invention, has evolved into countless forms. Think of it as the voiceover in your favorite film noir or the Greek chorus-like narrations in shows like Arrested Development. It's a storytelling device that adds depth, commentary, and sometimes humor, guiding the audience through the narrative maze. The Greeks knew how to keep their audiences engaged, and that tradition lives on. But let's not forget politics. Greek theatre wasn't just about entertainment. It was a platform for social commentary. The playwrights used their works to critique the political climate, question leadership, and explore the murky waters of morality. Sound familiar? Modern-day dramas, from The West Wing to Game of Thrones, often tackle these very themes, using fictional narratives to reflect on real-world issues. Political satire and drama are direct descendants of the Greek tradition, proving that the stage is as much a battleground for ideas as ever. Now, about those enduring myths of purity in ancient art. It's easy to romanticize Greek theatre as the pinnacle of cultural enlightenment, but let's not kid ourselves. These performances were as much about political maneuvering and social dynamics as they were about art. The ideal of the noble playwright crafting works of pure genius for the love of Dionysus sounds great, but the reality was messier. It was about status, influence, and the power dynamics of Athenian society. The plays were tools of persuasion and propaganda as much as they were artistic expressions. Yet, despite the gritty reality, there's a reason why Greek theatre continues to captivate us. It's that heady mix of drama, depth, and daring that keeps us coming back for more. It's the way these ancient stories tap into something fundamentally human, a desire to understand ourselves, our society, and our place in the world. The Greeks set the stage, quite literally, and we've been following their script ever since. So, as we wrap up this odyssey through the world of Greek theatre, let's appreciate the legacy left in its wake. From the amphitheatres of Athens to the silver screens of today, the echoes of those ancient performances still resonate. They remind us that while times change, the power of a good story endures. And maybe, just maybe, they offer us a glimpse into the soul of humanity, in all its flawed, glorious complexity. Dionysus would probably raise a cup of wine to that, assuming he wasn't too busy throwing the after-party of the century. The salt spray stung their faces like 1,000 angry bees, and the wind howled like a banshee with a vendetta. Christmas aboard a ship in the 18th century wasn't the rosy, festive affair that one might imagine. It was more akin to trying to host a holiday dinner in a hurricane while balancing on a seesaw. Sure, there were moments of camaraderie and cheer, but those were few and far between the relentless battles with the elements. Yet there they were, these brave, or perhaps foolhardy, sailors, risking life and limb amidst the icy waters of the North Atlantic, driven by the promise of profit that glistened brighter than any tinsel. First, let's talk economics, because believe it or not, that's what often propelled these seafarers into the jaws of winter storms. The demand for goods did not take a holiday break. In fact, it ramped up. The 18th and 19th centuries saw bustling trade routes where ships were loaded with everything from sugar and rum to spices and textiles, all destined to fill the stockings, or rather, the warehouses, of Europe's burgeoning market. Imagine a Black Friday that lasted for weeks, and the only way to keep the shelves stocked was by braving the wrath of nature herself. The stakes were high. A successful voyage could mean hefty profits. Merchants and shipowners saw the glint of gold in their coffers, urging captains to set sail despite the looming threat of storms. A single ship laden with tea or sugar could be worth thousands of pounds, a king's ransom in those days. For context, in 1773, the British East India Company had 17 million pounds of tea to offload after the Boston Tea Party, and they weren't about to let a pesky winter storm stop them. The potential for profit was irresistible, seducing even the most sensible of mariners into what was essentially an aquatic version of Russian roulette. But let's not romanticize it. The reality was far from the cozy, fireside tales spun by those who never set foot on a heaving deck. Life aboard ship was a grind, a relentless cycle of wet, cold, and hunger. The concept of a Merry Christmas didn't translate well when your world was reduced to a cramped, damp wooden vessel tossing on an indifferent sea. The quarters below deck were tight, think less luxury cruise, and more budget hostel with a leaky roof. The crew, often numbering between 20 to 30 men, were crammed into spaces barely enough for half that number, sharing hammocks and meals with the ever-present scent of salt and sweat. And speaking of meals, forget any visions of a lavish Christmas feast. The sailor's diet was a testament to survival, not indulgence. Hardtack biscuits, which could double as hockey pucks, and salt pork were the staples, occasionally supplemented by whatever could be caught or preserved along the way. Any Christmas cheer had to be conjured from rum rations, which were as much about dulling the chill as celebrating the season. It's said that necessity is the mother of invention, and nowhere was this truer than in the galley of a sea-tossed ship. Yet, amidst this stark reality, there was a peculiar camaraderie that emerged. It seems adversity, while it can break spirits, also has a strange way of forging bonds. Shipmates became family, and in the absence of actual kin, they celebrated as best they could, sharing stories, songs, and the occasional game of dice. There's a certain beauty in that resilience, one that perhaps justifies, if only slightly, the romanticism that later generations have attached to the notion of Christmas at sea. However, let's not ignore the elephant in the room, the myth of the cozy shipboard Christmas. It's easy to paint a picture of warmth and laughter, but the truth was often grim. The harshness of the sea was matched by the rigid hierarchy on board. The captain and officers dined somewhat better than the crew, a perk of rank that did little to bridge the divide between command and common sailor. Discipline was strict, sometimes brutally so, and any insubordination could result in punishment that was far from festive. A Christmas spent in the brig was hardly the stuff of joyous carols. The more we dig into the past, the clearer it becomes that the romanticized image of Christmas at sea is often more fiction than fact. And yet, the allure of the sea and the holiday spirit continue to captivate our imaginations. Perhaps it's the dichotomy, the clash of the brutal and the beautiful, that makes these stories endure. Sailors of old were not just chasing cargo. They were chasing a dream, one that promised adventure, fortune, and occasionally, a sense of belonging in the vast, indifferent ocean. So, as we cozy up with our hot cocoa in modern times, let's spare a thought for those who faced the dark, icy waters with nothing but wooden hulls and iron wills. Their stories remind us that while the sea is a harsh mistress, it's also a stage for incredible human tenacity and resilience. And maybe, just maybe, That's the real gift of a Christmas at sea. And speaking of tenacity, let's dive right into the chilly depths of history, where not every Christmas tale aboard a ship ends with a clink of tankards and hearty laughter. Instead, some ended with a crunch of timber against rock, and the chilling realization that the sea wasn't just indifferent, it was downright unforgiving. Cue the ominous music, because we're about to explore some of the most notorious shipwrecks that occurred around the holiday season. First on our list of maritime misadventures is the HMS Association, a ship that met its icy fate in 1707. Picture this: the pride of the Royal Navy, a 90-gun second-rate ship, part of Sir Cloudesley Shovel's fleet. They were sailing back to England after a stint in the Mediterranean, but the homecoming party was cut short by a navigational error that would make even the most seasoned sailor wince. On October 22, 1707, dense fog and a miscalculation of position led the fleet directly into the jaws of disaster, literally. The association struck the treacherous rocks of the Isles of Scilly. 3 other ships followed suit, and over 400 men perished in what became one of Britain's worst maritime disasters. Imagine that, a navigational blunder wiping out nearly a whole fleet, all because the captain wasn't exactly a GPS wizard. Now, here's the kicker. This tragedy was a catalyst for change. The ensuing public outcry led to the Longitude Act of 1714, which offered a handsome reward for anyone who could solve the longitude problem. The prize, a whopping £20,000, a king's ransom back then, roughly equivalent to over £3 million today. This was the spark that fueled innovations like John Harrison's marine chronometer, which drastically improved navigational accuracy. So while the HMS Association's end was tragic, it did usher in a new era of safer sea travel. Talk about a bittersweet legacy. Let's fast forward a bit to the 20th century, a time when technology had supposedly tamed the seas. Enter the SS Marine Electric, a World War II-era T2 tanker that met its demise in the early hours of February 12, 1983, not quite Christmas, but close enough to be winter's unwelcome gift. The ship was attempting to navigate the treacherous waters off the coast of Virginia when it capsized during a storm. The culprit, a deadly cocktail of human error and outdated equipment. The ship was overloaded with coal and had been patched up so many times it resembled a quilt more than a seaworthy vessel. Of the 34 crew members, only 3 survived. The disaster led to significant changes in maritime safety regulations, including more rigorous inspections and the establishment of the Coast Guard's Rescue Swimmer program, proving once again that it sometimes takes tragedy to spur progress. Now, let's talk about the myth of the noble sea captain. Ah yes, the romantic notion of the gallant leader, standing tall on the deck, guiding his ship and crew through perilous waters. Cue the swelling music, right? Well, not quite. The reality was often far less glamorous. Think more along the lines of a rigid hierarchy where the captain was king and not the benevolent kind. The captain's word was law, and discipline was enforced with an iron fist, or sometimes a literal cat-o'-nine-tails. Any insubordination was swiftly and often brutally punished. This wasn't a democracy, folks. It was more like a floating dictatorship. Take Captain Edward Smith of the Titanic fame. While he was indeed lauded for his calm demeanor, the truth was his decision-making, or lack thereof, played a role in the ill-fated ship's demise. Despite multiple iceberg warnings, the Titanic plowed ahead at full speed, because, well, why let a little thing like a massive floating ice cube slow you down? The result was a collision that sent the unsinkable ship to the bottom of the North Atlantic, costing over 500 souls their lives. Smith went down with the ship, a decision that added to the myth of the noble captain, but did little to comfort those left behind. And let's not forget the conditions faced by the crew. If you think your boss is demanding, spare a thought for the sailors who worked in near-constant dampness, with rations that would make a prison meal look like a banquet. The hierarchy was stark. Officers dined on better food, slept in better quarters, and generally had a better time than the grunts below deck. The phrase, all in the same boat, might have been literal, but it was hardly equitable. The reality of life at sea was that human error could be as deadly as the fiercest storm. In 1914, the Empress of Ireland sank in the St. Lawrence River after colliding with another ship in thick fog. The collision ripped a gash in her hull, and she sank in just 14 minutes, taking over 1,000 souls with her. The tragedy was largely overshadowed by the outbreak of World War I, but it was a stark reminder of how quickly things could go wrong when visibility was low and communication was poorer than a one-bar Wi-Fi signal. The appeal of the sea is undeniable. Its vastness promises adventure, fortune, and the allure of the unknown. But it's a place where hubris and ignorance can be as deadly as any tempest. The wrecks of the HMS Association, SS Marine Electric, and Empress of Ireland serve as somber reminders that the sea, while beautiful, is never to be underestimated. As we continue to unravel these tales of maritime mishap, remember that behind every shipwreck is a story of human ambition, error, and the relentless power of nature. Stay tuned as we sail into the next chapter, where we'll explore the economic and political forces that drove men to risk everything, even during the supposedly peaceful season of goodwill. But before we hoist the sails on this technological voyage, let's pause for a moment to acknowledge the sheer audacity required to even attempt taming the seas. When you're staring down a wall of icy water taller than a 3-story building, it takes a special kind of optimism, or perhaps lunacy, to think you can outsmart it with a few planks of wood and some clever gadgets. Yet, that's exactly what human history is, a long, stubborn dialogue with nature, punctuated by the occasional oops, maybe that wasn't such a great idea. Let's dive into the 18th century, where shipbuilding was less about aesthetics and more about not sinking. The era was a hotbed of innovation, a bit like Silicon Valley, but with more sea shanties and fewer hoodies. Shipbuilders started experimenting with materials, throwing iron into the mix like it was a new ingredient on a culinary show. Iron hulls began to replace their wooden counterparts in the early 19th century, promising durability and strength. But don't be fooled. Iron wasn't an instant sea panacea. It made ships heavier and more expensive, and shipyards had to adjust their methods and their budgets accordingly. An iron ship could cost about 20% more than a wooden one, a hefty price tag when you're balancing on the knife's edge of profit and loss. Meanwhile, navigational technology was having its own little renaissance. Enter the marine chronometer, an invention that might not have been as flashy as a new iPhone, but was every bit as revolutionary. John Harrison, a self-taught clockmaker, cracked the code in 1761 with his H4 chronometer, a device that allowed sailors to determine longitude with unprecedented accuracy. This was a big deal in an era when guessing your location could mean the difference between docking safely or becoming a fish's dinner. Harrison's invention won him a partial payout from the Longitude Axe Prize, a tidy sum that was equivalent to several £1 million today. However, the chronometer was not a cure-all. It was delicate, expensive, and required regular winding and maintenance. Drop it once, and you might as well start carving your own tombstone. Despite these advancements, the sea remained a fickle dance partner. Icebergs lurked in the shadows, gales laughed in the face of human ingenuity, and fog wrapped ships in a blanket of uncertainty. The infamous Titanic, a ship that was the pinnacle of early 20th century technology, learned this lesson the hard way in 1912. Even with its watertight compartments and advanced communication systems, it was no match for an iceberg that tore a gash in its hull, sending it, and over 500 souls, to a watery grave. It was a harsh reminder that no amount of technological prowess could completely negate the whims of nature. Iron, steam, and steel. These were the buzzwords of the Industrial Revolution, a period that promised to shrink the world and make the seas our servant. And indeed, steam power reduced travel times and increased shipping reliability. By the mid-19th century, steamships were cutting the transatlantic crossing from weeks to mere days. The SS, Great Britain, launched in 1843, was a marvel of its time, the first iron steamer to cross the Atlantic. But steamships had their own Achilles heel, coal. They guzzled it like a frat boy at a keg party, requiring frequent stops to refuel. Coal was messy, expensive, and came with its own set of logistical nightmares. You could never stray too far from a coal station unless you fancied a long, awkward drift. As we venture further into the 19th century, ironclads and warships were the new kids on the block, boasting armor that could withstand cannon fire. The HMS Warrior, launched in 1860, was the star of the British fleet, a floating fortress that seemed to herald a new era of naval invincibility. Yet, the sea laughed in the face of human hubris. The warrior never fired a shot in anger, as the nature of naval warfare shifted yet again, rendering her obsolete within a decade. It was a classic case of technology sprinting ahead, only to trip over its own shoelaces. And what about the romantic notion of the captain as a master of the seas, steering his iron beast with the precision of a surgeon? In reality, many captains were at the mercy of their miscalculations. Consider the case of the SS Central America, a steamship that sank in 1857 during a hurricane off the Carolina coast. Captain William Lewis Herndon made the fateful decision to head into the storm, believing his ship could weather it. Nature had other plans, and the Central America went down, taking with it over 400 souls and 30,000 pounds of gold, a maritime tragedy that contributed to the panic of 1857, sending economic shockwaves across the globe. By the early 20th century, radio telegraphs became the new lifeline, allowing ships to communicate distress signals. The Titanic, despite its tragic end, showcased the potential of this technology. Its wireless operators sent out SOS signals, which led to the Carpathia's rescue of over 700 survivors. A bittersweet victory for technology amidst disaster. But even the magic of radio waves had its limits. In 1914, the RMS Empress of Ireland sank after a collision in thick fog, despite having radios on board. The sea, it turned out, was an equal opportunity destroyer, indifferent to technological advances. So here we are, navigating the treacherous waters between progress and peril. Human ingenuity can build iron hulls, devise clocks that keep time at sea, and harness steam to shrink oceans. Yet no invention can fully tame the capriciousness of the sea. As we sail into the next chapter, with our eyes on the horizon and history as our compass, let's remember that while we can strive to conquer nature, we must also respect it. Stay tuned as we delve into the economic and political forces that charted courses across these unpredictable waters, even during the season of peace and goodwill. And as we set our course for the heart of Christmas at sea, brace yourself for a tale that swaps the scent of pine for brine and replaces eggnog with grog. Oh yes, sailors were nothing if not resourceful, a quality perhaps born out of necessity when your Yuletide backdrop is a rocking boat rather than a cozy hearth. Let's kick things off with the sights and sounds of a seafaring Christmas. Picture this: a wooden vessel, its decks slick with salt spray, where the closest thing to a Christmas tree might be a mast adorned with whatever green bits the crew could scavenge. Evergreen branches, a rare luxury. More often, they'd make do with painted wood or bits of fabric. The decorations may have been humble, but the spirit was anything but. A sailor's ingenuity knew no bounds, and they would craft makeshift ornaments from seashells, rope, and the odd bit of metal. Imagine a DIY Pinterest board, but with more tar and fewer glue guns. Now, onto the culinary delights, or lack thereof. The menu was decidedly less festive feast and more survival rations, starring the ubiquitous hardtack and salt pork. But even in these humble meals, sailors found room for festivity. Rum, the liquid courage of choice, was doled out with a bit more generosity, turning the normally stoic deck into a scene of slightly merry revelry. And let's not forget the plum duff, a pudding made from flour, suet, and dried fruit. It might not win any Michelin stars, but on the open sea, it was a Michelin miracle. What about entertainment, you ask? Well, sailors knew how to make their own fun. On Christmas, the usual dice and card games took on a holiday twist, with the stakes raised ever so slightly by the spirit of the season. Sea shanties, those rhythmic ballads of maritime life, were modified to include festive verses. It was like a nautical karaoke night, only with more harmonicas and fewer power ballads. And if the dice were kind, and the rum flowed freely, sometimes you'd even get a dance or two, with sailors stomping the deck like it was their very own ballroom floor. But the most poignant part of any Christmas at sea were the letters and diaries. These were the lifelines to land, the paper bridges to family and friends. Sailors would pour their hearts into these missives, crafting words that were equal parts hope and longing. It's in these letters we find the raw truth of a sailor's life, the yearning for home, the hope for safe passage, and the bittersweet acceptance of their place between the waves. These weren't just messages in bottles. They were capsules of emotion tossed into the vastness of time. Now, let's talk about the cultural ripple effects of these sea-bound celebrations. Sailors, by the nature of their work, were cultural emissaries, carrying traditions from one port to the next. Their Christmas customs would often blend with those of the lands they visited, creating a rich tapestry of maritime folklore. It's said that the Christmas tree tradition was spread by German sailors, who decorated their ships with small trees during the holiday season. Whether fact or folklore, it's a testament to the sea's role as a conduit of culture. But let's not overly romanticize the scene. The reality was a mix of camaraderie and chaos. Discipline was still enforced, hierarchy maintained, and any breaches of order could land a sailor in hot water, or worse, the brig. The captain's word was law, and the jingle of chains could replace the jingle of bells if one wasn't careful. It was a tightrope walk between festivity and formality, a dance as delicate as any performed on solid ground. In the grand tapestry of history, these Christmases at sea were small, vibrant threads. They are reminders of human resilience and adaptability, of how traditions can be maintained even in the most inhospitable environments. As we navigate through these stories, we're reminded that the sea, while vast and often unforgiving, was also a place of community and creativity. The sailors of old found ways to celebrate amidst the storms, creating their own kind of holiday magic with every voyage. But hold your applause, we're not done yet. The stories of these sailors, their celebrations, and their sacrifices are far from over. As we chart a course towards the next chapter, we'll delve deeper into the influence of these maritime traditions on the broader cultural landscape and uncover more tales from the high seas. So, stay tuned as we continue to explore the intersection of human spirit and oceanic adventure, because the best stories are those that leave you longing for more. And so, the sea beckons, wrapping myths and memories in its salty embrace, as we dive headfirst into the murky waters of maritime folklore. It's a reminder that sailors were not just traversing the ocean. They were navigating a complex web of tales spun from truth and fantasy. Let's peel back the layers of these stories and see what lies beneath the barnacle-encrusted surface. First off, let's talk about those enduring myths, the ones where every sailor becomes a heroic figure, battling monstrous waves while singing cheery carols under a blushing sky. It's easy to understand their appeal. Who doesn't want to believe in the romantic notion of a seafaring Christmas where the captain is a jolly old soul, the crew is a band of merry men, and the sea is just a backdrop to their festive frolics? But the truth is, the sea was often a more formidable adversary than a willing participant in holiday cheer. Take the legend of the Flying Dutchman, a ghost ship doomed to sail the oceans forever, unable to make port. It's a tale that combines the supernatural with the very real fears sailors faced: isolation, the relentless sea, and the ever-present spectre of bad luck. The Dutchman was supposedly captained by a man who defied nature's wrath, a fitting metaphor for the arrogance that often led ships into perilous waters. While the legend itself may be a flight of fancy, it speaks to the very real dangers of sea voyages, where one wrong decision could mean an eternal dance with the deep. This brings us to the economic undercurrents that fueled these myths. The 18th and 19th centuries were driven by a relentless pursuit of profit. Ships didn't set sail for pleasure. They were on a mission to deliver goods and fill coffers. The stakes were high, so high that merchants and seamen were willing to risk life and limb for a cut of the fortune. It's no wonder that stories of ghost ships and cursed voyages emerged in such an environment. They were cautionary tales wrapped in the allure of adventure, warning against the hubris of man versus nature. Yet, it's not all grim tales and ghostly apparitions. The Christmas truce of 1914, though not at sea, illustrates the contrasting nature of myth and reality. British and German soldiers put down their weapons, singing carols and exchanging gifts in an unofficial ceasefire. The romance of such moments belies the brutal reality of war, just as the myth of a merry Christmas at sea masks the harsh conditions sailors faced. These stories endure because they offer a glimmer of humanity amidst hardship, a reminder that the spirit of the season can sometimes shine through the darkest of times. Technological advances during these eras also played a part in shaping these narratives. As steamships replaced sail and radio waves bridged distances, the myth of the noble sea captain steering his vessel through treacherous waters became less about skill and more about managing technology. The Titanic's tragic tale is a prime example. It was billed as unsinkable, a marvel of modern engineering, yet it succumbed to an iceberg, a stark reminder that no amount of human ingenuity can completely negate the sea's unpredictability. Let's not forget the cultural impact. Sailors were cultural conduits, and their stories spread across ports like wildfire. Whether it was the Christmas tree tradition or tales of sea monsters, these narratives fed the collective imagination, shaping perceptions of the sea as a place of both danger and wonder. These stories persist because they speak to our innate desire for adventure, our fascination with the unknown, and our need to find meaning in the chaos of nature. In reflecting on these myths and legends, we see how they've woven themselves into the tapestry of maritime history. They offer romance and reality, a duality that continues to captivate. While the reality of life at sea was often brutal, the myths that emerged were a balm, offering hope and a sense of purpose. It's a testament to the human spirit's resilience, its ability to find light in the darkest of storms. So, as we draw this maritime journey to a close, let's raise a glass, be it rum or eggnog, to the sailors of old, those daring souls who braved the seas amidst the chill of winter. Their stories remind us that while the ocean is a vast and indifferent force, it is also a stage for human courage, ingenuity, and the enduring quest for something beyond the horizon. The sea may be a harsh mistress, but it is also a canvas, painted with tales of triumph and tragedy, myth and reality that continue to ripple through time, shaping our understanding of what it means to seek adventure, and perhaps a little holiday cheer on the high seas.